Chapter 2380. Tier 3 team mini-players waited in Zero Wing's residence for their turn to take the recruitment test, making the residence quite lively. Because of the commotion, no one noticed the 24 cloaked Zero Wing members' arrival. At this point, seeing Zero Wings leave or enter the residence in their cloaks had become the norm. Starlink's bounty was no trivial matter, and for poorer experts, killing Zero Wings members for a quick buck was easy. Zero Wings members could only avoid hostile players by hiding their identities with black cloaks, and to enter the guild residences, they only needed to reveal their guild emblems to the members that guarded the entrances. Many of Zero Wings members had begun to take these precautions recently. However, unlike most of the guild's players, these cloaked players didn't stop to rest in the lounge or visit the quest area. They made their way straight to the guild leader's office, where Shifeng had been waiting for a while. Once they entered the office, the 24 players removed their cloaks and revealed themselves. As they did, violent, scorching auras filled the room. Their combined auras could paralyze Tier 2 experts with fear. "What do you think, guild leader? We're much stronger than before, aren't we?" Kola boasted as he radiated dense mana. "Guild leader, don't listen to him. He was the last of us to complete his promotion quest. He just got lucky and constructed an advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate," Shadow Sword said. "Hey, I'm satisfied with that. At least my mana body is better than yours. I'm happy enough to squeeze into the 8th place on the team," Kola said joyfully. Before they had left to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests, Shifeng had informed them of the importance of their mana body, and told them that they should try as hard as they could to earn a gold mana body. Shifeng had also offered tips about the mana body's construction process. Initially, Kola had only aimed to construct an intermediate gold mana body with an 85% completion rate, but during his second try, he had been inspired and constructed an advanced gold mana body. Of their group, only 10 people had completed an advanced gold mana body with a 75% completion rate or higher. Although the difference was only one rank, the difference between their stamina and concentration recovery rates was significant. An advanced gold mana body would be immensely helpful to them in the future. An advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate? Shifeng was surprised by Kola's achievement. Compared to magical class players, physical class players were at a disadvantage when constructing their mana bodies. Although Kola's combat standards were considerable, he was only averagely talented among Zero Wing's main force members. If not for his fragmented legendary shield, he wouldn't have even ranked among the top 15 in the main force with his combat power. Moreover, Shifeng had heard about the Tyrant Bear Kola's mana body during his previous life. At the time, Kola had only had a basic gold mana body with a 78% completion rate, yet he had still managed to shake Starmoon Kingdom, becoming one of its top-ranked MTs. Now that Kola had an advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate, his future strength would undergo a qualitative improvement. Kola's mana body is nothing, guild leader. Boss Tianxing and Big Sis E are even more amazing. Boss Tianxing constructed a 93% peak gold mana body, and Big Sis E constructed a 95% peak gold mana body. Their stamina and concentration recovery rates are ridiculous, Turtledove interjected. Originally, Turtledove had been relatively proud of constructing an advanced gold mana body. After all, Shifeng had told them that the difference between intermediate and advanced rank was considerable. However, Yin Tianxing, Yi Luofei, Zhao Yueru, Silent Blade, Alluring Summer, and Yulan were so much more powerful. Every one of them had successfully constructed a peak gold mana body. Moreover, the weakest among them had an 80% completion rate. Since Stubbornbone, who ranked 7th among them, hadn't been able to construct a peak gold mana body with an 80% completion or higher, he had settled for an 89% advanced gold mana body as he ran out of time. Compared to the top 7 players, Kola's achievement was nothing. While the team bickered, Shifeng received a compilation of their promotion results. He was shocked when he examined the data. Of the 24 players that had completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, the weakest of them had constructed an 80% peak silver mana body. Not even the superpowers of his past had dreamed of such wonderful results. In the past, the majority of the various superpowers experts had been fortunate to construct an intermediate or advanced silver mana body. Second and third-rate guilds had thrown massive celebrations if any of their experts had constructed a silver mana body at all. A silver mana body was the minimum requirement for players to reach tier 4 or higher. After all, not even experts from ordinary guilds had dared to dream of acquiring a gold mana body. In fact, players with gold mana bodies were even quite rare in the various superpowers. Every additional expert with a gold mana body had significantly elevated a superpower's status. The advantages of a gold mana body when exploring level 100+ neutral maps were that massive. And yet, of the 24 Zero-Wing members that completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, 19 had constructed gold mana bodies. Guild leader, we haven't had the opportunity to test out our new bodies, so I suggest we head to the battle arena. I agree. My body feels too strong. It feels a little strange to move. Since we've already completed our promotion quests, we should spar with each other to get a feel of our new strength. They had been too busy celebrating their success that they hadn't bothered to test their new strength. They hadn't had any good places to do so either. However, since so many Tier 3 players were here, it was a good opportunity to learn what they could do. You want to test your new strength? Chuckling, Shifeng said. Alright, it's simple then. Plenty of superpowers want a piece of our Stone Forest City right now. And Starlink has sent a large number of experts to the Cold Spring Forest. You guys can go and test your strength there, and while you're at it, inform Starlink's people that they have no place in the Cold Spring Forest. Even after finding out that Cola and the others had completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, Shifeng had still worried that they didn't have enough players to deal with Starlink's forces. Initially, he had planned to mobilize the Night Division to teach Starlink a lesson and warn the other superpowers against trying to steal Stone Forest City. However, it seemed that he could save Zero Wing's final trump card. With the superior mana bodies Cola and his companions had constructed, they could move through the Cold Spring Forest unobstructed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Starlink. Wonderful. I've been itching to practice some of the combat techniques I haven't fully mastered yet. Starlink's peak experts should be excellent practice partners. Shifeng's decision excited the entire team. Although fighting a bunch of Tier 2 experts wouldn't help them properly gauge their new strength, they could use this opportunity to test the effects of their Tier 3 mana bodies in a level 100 neutral map. The 24 main force members then resupplied and repaired their equipment in White River City, before teleporting to Stone Forest City. Chapter 2381. Difference in foundations. In one of the quiet stone forests in the Cold Spring Forest, a 100-man team was hunting the level 100+ monsters residing in a canyon here. In front of this team, the level 100, Great Lord rank 3-headed lizard, which posed a huge problem for the teams of major powers, was not a challenge at all. The team thoroughly suppressed the Great Lord and continuously shaved away at its HP. Everyone, put in more effort. The boss is nearly dead. A blue-armored man who looked to be in his 30s, shouted as he blocked an attack from the 3-headed lizard using his 2-handed hammer. The 3-headed lizard could launch attacks simultaneously with all 3 of its heads. Aside from the 2 MTs in the team blocking 2 of the lizard's heads, the hammer-wielding demonic fighter was holding his own against the 3rd of the lizard's heads without losing any ground. If the experts of the various major powers operating within the Cold Spring Forest were to see this scene, their eyes would most likely fall out of their sockets, because this 100-man team was not a guild's, but one made up of independent players. At this stage of the game, level 100 neutral maps were still extremely dangerous for players. Even the main force of the various major powers would have a difficult time surviving in a level 100 neutral map. If they stumbled upon a level 100 Great Lord, they would try to avoid it as much as possible, since defeating such a monster required quite some time. After all, the longer a battle took to end, the higher the likelihood of the battle attracting nearby monsters. If too many monsters joined the fray, a team wipe was guaranteed. This 100-man team, however, had actually taken the initiative to attack a level 100 Great Lord. Moreover, it was perfectly suppressing the 3-headed lizard. The team's strength could practically rival that of the exploration teams of superpowers. After a few more minutes of battle, the 3-headed lizard finally lost all its HP and collapsed before the 100-man team, the experience bar of every team member increasing by a sizable chunk. At the same time, a few pieces of sparkling level 100 equipment dropped around the three-headed lizard's corpse. Our leveling speed here really is fast. At this rate, I'll reach level 101 in less than 2 days. The leveling speed isn't the most important point. Look at the attributes of the loot. They're on an entirely different level compared to our level 95 equipment. If we can get a full set of level 100 secret silver equipment, our attributes will surpass even those of players geared in level 95 dark gold set equipment. It's too difficult to obtain level 100 secret silver equipment. Normally, only Grand Lords will drop it. Even until now, we've only come across a few Grand Lords, and some of them are too strong for us to raid. Plus, our operation time is very limited. Collecting a full set of level 100 secret silver equipment is simply too difficult. Zero Wing sure is lucky. It actually managed to transfer Stone Forest City to this place. If our Dark Dragon Adventurer team could get a resting spot in a level 100 neutral map as well, let alone secret silver equipment, even level 100 fine gold equipment would be possible. We could start challenging our Tier 3 promotion quests. When Dark Dragon's members spoke about Stone Forest City, envy filled their eyes. Compared to players that had yet to venture into level 100 neutral maps, they had a much clearer idea of how valuable a resting spot in a level 100 neutral map was. However, as Stone Forest City was not open to the public, they could only stare at the city from outside. Commander, I heard that Zero Wing has established an adventurer alliance. Silver members in the alliance can enter Stone Forest City. Why don't we negotiate with Zero Wing? With our adventurer team's strength, I believe Zero Wing will be happy to recruit us and promote us into a silver-ranked adventurer team right away. A level 100 Dark Cleric said as he looked at the demonic fighter leading the team. Everyone else on the team nodded in agreement with the Dark Cleric's words. Dark Dragon was one of the famous top adventurer teams of the demonic hell world. Dark Dragon might have only 1,000 members or so, but it was fully capable of toppling the main continent's first-rate guilds. If Dark Dragon decided to join Zero Wing's newly established Adventurer Alliance, Zero Wing would definitely be more than willing to offer Dark Dragon additional benefits. It is indeed inefficient for us to continue like this, Dark Dawn, the commander of Dark Dragon, said after giving the matter some thought. After this grinding trip, a few of you should go and negotiate with Zero Wing. Say that our bottom line for joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance is for us to become a silver adventurer team. If Zero Wing isn't willing to give us that much, then we can forget about any partnerships. In Dark Dawn's opinion, the only benefit of joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance was the right to enter Stone Forest City. If Dark Dragon's members could not enter Stone Forest City immediately after joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, then there would be no point in seeking membership at all. Meanwhile, as the Dark Dragon Adventurer team's members were resting, explosions resounded, and dazzling lights appeared a short distance away. Commander, some players are fighting against each other nearby. A ranger that had been monitoring the surroundings suddenly shouted. Who are they? Dark Dawn asked. There aren't many of them. One side is wearing Zero Wing's emblem, so they should be Zero Wing's team. As for the other side, I think it's Starlink's Hellfire Legion, the ranger reported. The Hellfire Legion? It seems Zero Wing's members are in trouble. Dark Dawn frowned at the mention of the Hellfire Legion. As an original inhabitant of the demonic hell world, Dark Dawn understood just how powerful Starlink's Hellfire Legion was. The Legion's members all possessed the demonic hell world's special legacy. This special legacy was something all players inhabiting the demonic hell world wished to obtain. Unfortunately, Dark Palace kept a tight grip on the source of this legacy, and would release only a small number to the public. The Dark Dragon Adventurer team had paid a steep price and secured merely a dozen or so of these special legacies. Even so, these special legacies were already more than enough to let Dark Dragon undergo a qualitative transformation and become a top adventurer team in the demonic hell world. Meanwhile, all 1,000 members of Starlink's newly established Hellfire Legion actually owned this special legacy. One could easily imagine how powerful the Hellfire Legion was. Commander, should we lend Zero Wing's members a hand? The Dark Cleric asked. If we help them now, our negotiations with Zero Wing should go much more smoothly. No rush. Let's head over and suss out the situation first, Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. After saying so, he hurriedly led his team to the scene of the battle. Meanwhile, on the other side of the stone forest, one of Zero Wing's core teams was fending off the Hellfire Legion members' assault while desperately retreating toward Stone Forest City. Big Sis wonder, these people are too strong. At this rate, we won't make it back to Stone Forest City. You should leave us and run. A female druid focused on healing said hurriedly when she saw that the members defending the rear of the team kept getting pushed back. In terms of basic attributes and combat standards, the Hellfire Legion's members were superior to them by a large margin. If not for the complex terrain here preventing the scale of the battle from escalating, as well as the few Zero-Wing players geared in the Crimson Sunset, their team would have long since suffered annihilation. However, although they were currently holding off the Hellfire Legion, their deaths were still only a matter of time. Don't even think of getting away so easily. We've already placed a tracker on all of you. Bright Dawn, one of Starlink's vice guild leaders, shouted. He then commanded, "Everyone, make sure none of them leave here alive." As soon as Bright Dawn said so, four Void Realm experts from the Hellfire Legion immediately adjusted to prevent Silent Wonder from escaping. Silent Wonder did not have brilliant silver with her, so she could rely on only the strengthened Crimson Sunset to do battle. As a result, her advantage over the Hellfire Legion members in terms of basic attributes was small. Facing the combined assault of four peak experts, even Silent Wonder had no choice but to focus on evading for now. While Silent Wonder was occupied, a few Hellfire Legion members used this opportunity to break through Zero Wing's defensive line and charge at Zero Wing's healers. "Commander, should we make a move?" the Dark Cleric from Dark Dragon asked the demonic fighter. "We don't stand a chance. That's a 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion. Even if we join the fight, we'll only delay the inevitable," Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. Although Zero Wing has Stone Forest City, it still doesn't stand a chance against Starlink out in the fields. The demonic Hellworld's special legacy would give a peak expert the strength to contend against an apex expert, and possibly even a decisive advantage. Meanwhile, if such peak experts fought in a group, their performance would be even more amazing. Unless Zero Wing's members gain this special legacy or its equivalent, they would not stand a chance against the Hellfire Legion members at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As Zero Wing's casualties were increasing, however, a loud hum suddenly came from the sky, immediately attracting everyone's attention. When everyone turned to look at the origin of this noise, what entered their sights was a giant crimson vessel made of steel. Before anyone could react, 24 figures jumped off the steel ship. Meanwhile, along with the appearance of these 24 members, Starlink's and Dark Dragon's members all fell into a stunned silence. Tier 3 players. Chapter 2382. Overwhelming Strength. Why does Zero Wing have so many Tier 3 players? The distant spectating members of Dark Dragon felt their minds screeching to a halt when they saw the newcomers. Kola and the others were not wearing black cloaks, boldly flaunting their Tier 3 life aura. When they jumped off the Crimson Dragon flying ship, it was as if 24 primordial beasts had just dropped from the sky. Tier 3 was the goal that all experts dreamed of reaching at this point. Even the old monsters of super guilds had most likely just started challenging their Tier 3 promotion quests. Now, however, Zero Wing revealed that, aside from Black Flame, it had 24 other Tier 3 players. At this moment, let alone Dark Dragon's members, even Silent Wonder and the other beleaguered Zero Wing members were stunned by this situation, utterly speechless as they stared at Kola and his companions. Silent Wonder, in particular, was filled with an indescribable sense of shock. Originally, she thought that she had already seen through Zero Wing's foundations. She had never imagined that what she saw was merely the tip of the iceberg. With these additional 24 Tier 3 players, Zero Wing could definitely reign supreme over the entire Cold Spring Forest. Meanwhile, gloom descended upon Starlink's members at this sudden development. The imposing aura they exuded before was now nowhere to be found. They also tried to remain as silent as possible, lest they catch the attention of the newcomers. "You punks from Starlink. Weren't you guys having fun chasing our people? Why are you stopping now?" Kola demanded, smirking as he retrieved the Titan shield slung on his back and glancing at the Hellfire Legion members before him. "Cola, why are you wasting words with them? Since they dare ambush our guildmates out in the fields, the only outcome awaiting them is death," Shadow Sword said as he glared coldly at Bright Dawn's team. "Moreover, the sooner we get rid of them, the sooner we can return. The guild leader is still waiting for us to report back to him." Upon hearing Shadow Sword's words, Yen Tianxing and the others nodded in agreement and promptly readied their weapons. They then stalked toward the Hellfire Legion, each step they took making the hearts of the Hellfire Legion members shudder. At the same time, the Hellfire Legion members also started retreating unconsciously. "Vice Guild Leader, what should we do?" The Berserker standing beside Bright Dawn asked anxiously. "Zero Wing has far more Tier 3 players than we anticipated. Our 100-man team can't handle this." The Hellfire Legion had come to the Cold Spring Forest, assuming that Shifeng would take action against them. Hence, they decided to hunt for Zero Wing's members in teams of 100. That way, even if Shifeng made a move, they could handle him. Now, however, 24 Tier 3 players had appeared before them. This was totally different from what they planned. Zero Wing. Bright Dawn gnashed his teeth in anger as he looked at the Tier 3 players. "We don't have any other choice. Use all the deification crystals we have. Everyone else, do your best to escape." Even now, Starlink remained considerably fearful of Shifeng's existence as a Tier 3 player. Hence, the guild had specifically assigned 10 deification crystals to each of the Hellfire Legion's 100-man teams. That way, a team could instantly produce 10 Tier 3 players, enough to take down even an expert like Shifeng easily. Now, however, their deification crystals would only serve to buy time for the others to escape. After saying so, Bright Dawn and 9 other peak experts of the team took out a deification crystal from their bags and activated it, instantly raising themselves to Tier 3. Immediately afterward, all 10 of them charged at Cola's group. They were prepared to pin down Cola and the others to the best of their abilities, and allow the rest of their teammates to retreat safely from the area. To think that Starlink made such preparations as well. Although Zero Wing is powerful, Starlink is no pushover, either. "It seems Zero Wing won't be able to just swat the Hellfire Legion," Dark Dawn said, his understanding of superpowers getting refreshed upon seeing Bright Dawn's team use 10 deification crystals. After Dark Dragon became a top adventurer team in the demonic hell world, Dark Dawn had believed that Dark Dragon was superior to the main continent's various superpowers in terms of peak combatants. Looking at this scene now, however, that was not the case at all. Even if Dark Dragon's members had the demonic hell world's special legacy, the main continent's superpowers possessed powerful treasures like the deification crystal, which could forcibly promote a Tier 2 player into a Tier 3 player for a short period. "Come." Cola revealed an excited expression when he saw Bright Dawn and the others becoming Tier 3 players. He then raised his shield and charged forward all by himself, the confidence he exuded making it seem as if the 10 Tier 3 peak experts before him were no different from common monsters. "Coming at us alone?" Bright Dawn sneered at Cola's recklessness. "If you want to die so badly, we'll grant your wish. Everyone get rid of him first." Although they were at a numerical disadvantage in terms of Tier 3 experts, every one of them was a true peak expert. This was also the reason why Bright Dawn dared harbor the thought of distracting Cola and the others. Now Cola was actually charging at their group all alone. Even if Cola was an MT, this was simply suicidal. After saying so, Bright Dawn swung the Whitebone greatsword he wielded. The violent aura of death the greatsword released, transforming into 3 ghosts that flew at Cola. Not only did every one of these ghosts carry 120% of Bright Dawn's strength, but these ghosts were also akin to doppelgangers. Bright Dawn could control them for 10 seconds. Tier 3 Undead Knight skill, Undying Rage. Aside from Bright Dawn, the 2 Tier 3 elementalists positioned behind him also finished casting their spells. Immediately, pillars of fire descended from the sky, and earth spikes shot up from the ground. These attacks perfectly coordinated with the 3 ghosts Bright Dawn summoned, thoroughly sealing off Cola's paths of escape. This scene dumbfounded both Dark Dragon's members and Silent Wonder's group. The power, rapid execution, and coordination the Hellfire Legion's Tier 3 players displayed were simply inhuman. Just when the fire pillars and earthen spikes were about to devour Kola, however, Kola released an angry bellow and executed a powerful stomp on the ground. The resulting shockwave shattered some of the approaching earth spikes. At the same time, he raised the Titan Guard and summoned 8 translucent energy shields around himself. Tier 3 skill, Heavenly Defense. In the next moment, the 8 energy shields stopped the fire pillars and remaining earth spikes, preventing the attacks from damaging Kola. As for Bright Dawn's 3 ghosts, despite their frenzied assault, they failed to break through the 8 energy shields' defensive net. Impossible. Bright Dawn gaped at Kola in confusion. He knew about the Heavenly Defense skill, one of the standard skills of a Tier 3 Guardian Knight. Many Tier 3 NPC Guardian Knights possessed it. It was not an invulnerability skill. The energy shields created carried only 100% of the user's strength and defense. In other words, Heavenly Defense was a skill that provided the user with a more thorough defense. It did not offer any damage reduction effects whatsoever. Now, however, even after receiving multiple Tier 3 attacks, Kola had actually come out unscathed. If Shifeng were present, he would not have found this situation surprising at all. Setting aside the fact that Kola wielded a fragmented legendary shield, his Tier 3 mana body alone already allowed him to trample pseudo-Tier 3 players like Bright Dawn. The deification crystal did temporarily promote a player to Tier 3. However, the improvements provided applied only to skills, basic attributes, and physique. The deification crystal did not grant players a Tier 3 mana body. Meanwhile, without a Tier 3 mana body, players couldn't fully exhibit the power of Tier 3 skills and spells. In contrast, Tier 3 skills and spells empowered by a Tier 3 mana body would manifest drastically stronger effects. Before Bright Dawn and the other Hellfire Legion peak experts could react to the situation, Kola had already arrived before Bright Dawn and executed Shield Bash. Sensing the incoming attack, Bright Dawn instinctively raised his Whitebone sword to block the attack. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. U-boom. Upon collision, Bright Dawn felt as if a truck had just rammed him. His entire person went flying backward, his HP falling by over 40,000. The two sides were on entirely different strength levels. At this time, Zero Wing's other Tier 3 players had also made a move. Similar to Bright Dawn, the Hellfire Legion's other Tier 3 players were overwhelmed in both raw power and agility. Unable to put up any resistance whatsoever against Zero Wing's members, they rapidly lost HP. As for the Hellfire Legion's fleeing Tier 2 players, they were like fragile glass before Yen Tianxing, Iluafei, and Zhao Yueru. Every attack the trio from Zero Wing executed would reap at least one life. Rather than fighting experts, the trio felt as if they were slaughtering chicken. The difference in strength drove the Hellfire Legion members to despair. In less than 30 seconds, Zero Wing's members had not only disfigured the surrounding terrain completely, but also reduced all 100 Hellfire Legion members into corpses that gradually transformed into particles of light. Chapter 2383. Shocking the continent. Upon seeing the Hellfire Legion members dissipating corpses, the spectating members of the Dark Dragon Adventurer team fell into a daze. So these are Tier 3 players? Dark Dawn's heart quaked after seeing Kola and the other Tier 3 experts' performance. It was no exaggeration to say that fights between Tier 2 players and Tier 3 players were on entirely different levels. Although Dark Dawn had understood that Tier 2 players couldn't win against Tier 3 players, he had never dreamed that the gap was this massive. Although every member of the Hellfire Legion possessed the demonic Hellworld's special legacy, none of the Hellfire Legion's Tier 2 players had lasted more than one hit against Zero Wing's Tier 3 players. The strength of Tier 3 classes completely exceeded Dark Dawn's expectations. From the fight between the Hellfire Legion and Zero Wing, Dark Dawn could tell that Tier 3 players were superior not just in terms of basic attributes but also in reaction speed. A Tier 2 peak expert himself, Dark Dawn could tell that his reaction speed was slower than Kola's and the others by a heartbeat. Although the difference wasn't massive by any means, it was still enough to determine whether one could block an attack or not. This difference was why the Hellfire Legion's Tier 2 players failed to block the attacks launched by Zero Wing's Tier 3 players, and ended up getting killed instantly. After watching the performance of Zero Wing's 24 Tier 3 players, Dark Dawn concluded that even an army of 10,000 Tier 2 experts would suffer annihilation if they tried fighting against these 24 Tier 3 players. At this moment, the other members of Dark Dragon shared similar thoughts. The frightening power and reaction speed Zero Wings members displayed simply weren't something that could be overcome with numbers. While Dark Dragon's members were quietly discussing among themselves, Cola and the others suddenly looked in their direction. This situation frightened Dark Dragon's members, and they very nearly turned around to flee. "Commander, they're not mistaking us for Starlink's members, right?" The Dark Cleric standing beside Dark Dawn asked worriedly. Having witnessed the combat power Cola and the others displayed, the Dark Cleric was sure that if Zero Wings Tier 3 experts took action, then Dark Dragon's 100-man team would definitely share the Hellfire Legion's fate. In fact, the Dark Dragon team might die even more quickly than the Hellfire Legion. Now that they had already reached level 100, getting killed even once would pose a significant setback. After all, the amount of EXP required to go from level 99 to level 100 was massive. Moreover, the difference in strength between level 99 and level 100 players meant they would also miss out on many exploration opportunities. "I don't know. We should head over and greet them first," Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. He then steeled himself to step forward and take the initiative to greet Zero Wings members. However, by the time Dark Dawn stood up from his hiding place, Cola's group had already collected the items the Hellfire Legion dropped. They then brought the other Zero Wing members onto the Crimson Dragon flying ship and disappeared from the stone forest. Dark Dragon's members breathed out a deep sigh of relief. "They're actually ignoring us?" Dark Dawn could not help a bitter smile when he saw Cola and the others leaving. The Dark Dragon adventurer team was an existence that even the expert teams of superpowers feared. However, in the eyes of Cola and the others, Dark Dragon's members were akin to common monsters. However, Dark Dawn also understood the perspective of Zero Wings Tier 3 players. Cola and the others possessed the qualifications to look down on the Dark Dragon adventurer team. At this moment, Dark Dawn regretted his previous hesitation. Had his team moved to help Zero Wing earlier, they might have been able to form a close relationship with Zero Wings Tier 3 players. "Commander, they're gone. Should we head back to the canyon?" The Dark Cleric standing beside Dark Dawn asked. "No, we're returning to White River City," Dark Dawn said, shaking his head. "We're returning? But we still have plenty of time before we run out of gas," the Dark Cleric argued. "Returning now will be a huge waste." Level 100 neutral maps were quite distant from NPC cities. Even with the help of a mount, players still took a very long time to reach a level 100 neutral map. Hence, every team that visited the Cold Spring Forest would endure to their very limits before choosing to return. Their team had spent just half of their expected time in the Cold Spring Forest, yet Dark Dawn was already calling for them to return. "We're returning. The sooner, the better. It'll be best if we can join the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance before news regarding this matter gets exposed," Dark Dawn said seriously. Previously, Dark Dawn had still been hesitating over whether he should get Dark Dragon involved in the struggle between Zero Wing and Starlink. After all, the potential risks of siding with Zero Wing were greater than the potential gains. Now, however, he no longer cared about that. 24 Tier 3 players. With this many Tier 3 players, Zero Wing could rule over the Cold Spring Forest with an iron fist. The various superpowers would be crazy to pick a fight with Zero Wing here. Not to mention, Zero Wing also had Stone Forest City as its base. Once news of Zero Wing's Tier 3 players got out, adventurer teams and experts would definitely flock to the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance. Hence, Dark Dragon had to join the alliance before that happened and quickly accumulate CPs to raise its position in the alliance. After all, once the demand for the alliance's CPs increased, acquiring CPs would become more difficult. The Dark Cleric immediately understood what his commander meant, following which, Dark Dragon's members hurried back to White River City. Meanwhile, shortly after the Dark Dragon adventurer team left the Cold Spring Forest, the shocking news that a 100-man team from Starlink's Hellfire Legion got annihilated reached the ears of the various superpowers. A 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion got annihilated? 24 Tier 3 players? How is this possible? Burning Owl, who was currently raiding a field boss, was astonished as he read the report his subordinate just sent him. Starlink's Hellfire Legion had shocked the various superpowers with its might. Even Burning Owl was not confident that his Heaven Piercer team could survive an encounter with the Hellfire Legion. After all, the demonic Hellworld's special legacy was no laughing matter. Now, however, a 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion actually got annihilated. Moreover, Zero Wing now had an additional 24 Tier 3 players. Burning Owl could understand how a monster like Shifeng had come into existence. After all, as the guild leader of Zero Wing, Shifeng could utilize all of his guild's resources to go on dangerous and rewarding adventures. Hence, his reaching level 100 and completing his Tier 3 promotion quest so quickly was still within the realm of probability. However, Burning Owl simply couldn't bring himself to believe that aside from Shifeng, Zero Wing also had 24 more Tier 3 players. After all, even Long Xianglong had just started challenging his Tier 3 promotion quest. Burning Owl himself felt unready to take on the challenge. Shortly after the various superpowers received this information, news of Zero Wing's 24 additional Tier 3 players spread quickly to the ears of the various major powers as well. Over 20 Tier 3 players? How did Zero Wing accomplish such a feat? Amazing! Too amazing! Zero Wing is actually patrolling the Cold Spring Forest using its flying ship, combined with those 24 Tier 3 players. Nobody will dare target Zero Wing in the Cold Spring Forest now. Aside from the various major powers members, quite a few independent experts also heard about Zero Wing's recent achievements and were stupefied by this situation. As for the top adventurer teams that were originally planning to attack Zero Wing's members, they gave up on the idea, especially after seeing the mobility of the Crimson Dragon flying ship. After this incident, the number of players seeking to join Zero Wing and the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance skyrocketed. Guild leader, the commanders of many top and well-known adventurer teams have just contacted us. They're hoping that we can increase the variety of rare resources we're accepting, so that they can earn more points and get promoted to the silver rank a little sooner. Some superpowers also want to form a partnership with us in exchange for letting their members enter Stone Forest City, Liang Jing announced excitedly after contacting Shifeng. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It seems the actions of Cola's group yielded quite a result, Shifeng said, chuckling. How are things coming along with Stone Forest City's private houses? Shifeng had to admit that the deterrent effect of having over 20 Tier 3 players was much greater than just having one Tier 3 player. Now, even the various superpowers that had adopted a wait-and-see approach could no longer sit still. It's done. I've already refunded everyone who asked for one. Currently, we have over 12,000 empty private houses available in Stone Forest City, Liang Jing reported. Good. Make an announcement stating that Stone Forest City will not be open fully to the public. Candlelight will also be holding an auction for the leasing of Stone Forest City's private houses, and anyone who rents a private house in the city will be able to live in it immediately, Shifeng said, smiling. Shifeng had set aside the matter of leasing Stone Forest City's private houses, as the time hadn't been right. However, now that Cola and the others had completed their Tier 3 promotion quest and Zero Wing already had its own night division, including Stone Forest City's current popularity, it was the perfect time to lease Stone Forest City's private houses. Chapter 2384. Accumulating advantages after receiving Shifeng's instructions, Liang Jing posted an announcement on the forums, stating that Zero Wing would be leasing Stone Forest City's private houses. The moment she published the post on Star Moon Kingdom's official forums, the kingdom erupted in an uproar. Everyone had already learned a little about Stone Forest City through the information Zero Wing's members had leaked. They all came to the conclusion that the city was a haven for leveling resources. Unfortunately, players had been forced to gaze at the city from afar, since it had only been open to Zero Wing's members and the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance's silver members. However, now that Zero Wing had announced a way for non-members to gain access to the city, how could anyone ignore it? When they saw the private houses' leasing conditions, however, both the various major powers and the kingdom's independent players gasped. Stone Forest City's private houses were available for rent, but the Zero Wing was only leasing the houses on a weekly basis, not monthly, and the starting bid for the weekly rent was 30,000 credits. The price could easily rival the private house's monthly rent in the bottomless abyss. Zero Wing is too vicious. Although it's somewhat opening Stone Forest City to the public, only players who rent its private houses will be allowed in the city. But this is an opportunity for independent players like us. If we can win a private house in the upcoming auction, we'll have a much easier time leveling up and completing our Tier 3 promotion quests. Isn't the rent a little too expensive though? Zero Wings charging 30,000 credits per week. How can ordinary players possibly afford that rent? Everyone immersed themselves in heated discussions over Zero Wing's latest announcement, and many players considered the private houses starting bid too demanding. None of the independent players that were interested in Stone Forest City's private houses could bring themselves to accept this price. In contrast, a large number of adventurer teams and guilds began to apply to join the Candlelight trading firm's leasing auction as the news spread. Candlelight's shops in White River City grew overcrowded as these adventurer teams and guilds representatives arrived. Are these people mad? We're talking about 30,000 credits per week. How much of an advantage could they possibly gain in 7 days? A level 40 female player new to God's Domain was confused when she saw the frenzied crowd in the shop. She wondered if all of God's Domain's players had gone crazy. You've only recently joined the game, so you might not realize how valuable Stone Forest City's private houses are. A player's leveling speed in a level 100 neutral map is at least 3 times that of grinding in a level 90+ map. Moreover, level 100 equipment and resources drop in level 100 neutral maps. The various superpowers teams invest dozens of hours each day traveling to and from these maps just to grind, but if they had a private house in the area, they could teleport directly to the map, a level 94 Cursemancer informed the female player. Enviously he continued, "Moreover, I've heard that you can accumulate the double EXP buff and slightly accelerate your recovery speed while resting inside Stone Forest City's private houses. All of these benefits can boost your leveling speed." If he had had enough money, he would have applied to join the auction as well. He wouldn't have wasted his time slowly earning CPs in the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, trying to become a silver member. Meanwhile, inside one of White River City's restaurants, Elder, Zero Wing has over 20 Tier 3 players now. Even Starlink will be helpless against the guild in the Cold Spring Forest now. A handsome man in pitch-black armor reported to Evil Cheelin. Anxiously he asked, "What should we do about the Vice Guild leader's command?" Zero Wing's foundations had surprised them. With Tier 3 players' survivability in level 100 neutral maps, not even 10 Hellfire Legions could affect Zero Wing's development, much less the current 1,000-man Hellfire Legion. We've underestimated the guild. Zero Wing is certainly impressive to nurture so many Tier 3 players so soon. For now, we should settle for renting private houses in Stone Forest City, Evil Cheelin said, frowning as he read the latest report. Demon Palace only had around 24 members that were preparing for their Tier 3 promotion quest. Yet Zero Wing already had that many Tier 3 players. Even if we win some, I'm afraid that it won't be enough, the handsome youth worried. Demon Palace ruled over the demonic hell world, and had a massive number of experts under its command. Even if they rented all of Stone Forest City's private houses, they wouldn't satisfy the guild's demand. We're not in a hurry. Very few guild members are capable of challenging their Tier 3 promotion quests right now. A few hundred private houses should be enough, Evil Cheelin said, chuckling. However, this decision will haunt Zero Wing. Since the guild has opted out of opening Stone Forest City to the public, it won't last long once the various superpowers members complete their Tier 3 promotion quests. I can't wait to see whether or not Zero Wing can hold on to Stone Forest City. Evil Cheelin only expected Zero Wing to rule over the Cold Spring Forest for a short time. How many experts could the guild possibly have that could reach Tier 3? So soon compared to the various superpowers. It would only be a matter of time before Zero Wing was left behind. While the various powers discussed Zero Wing, Sherfong teleported to one of the Ten Saints Empire's border towns with Kola and his team. They then boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship, and flew to the Demonic Wolf Mountains, another level 100 neutral map. The Demonwolf mountain range was a forbidden land south of the Ten Saints Empire, and there were rumors that a ferocious beast, the Dark Battle Wolf, lived there. Even the Ten Saints Empire, one of God's domain's 4 great empires, was afraid of provoking the beast. The Dark Battle Wolf had the strength to rival a Tier 5 Dragon King, a being that could even contend with Tier 6 gods. Moreover, a destructive aura enveloped the entire mountain range. Tier 2 players wouldn't survive more than 3 hours in the area. It was also home to the Dark Wolf race, which had inherited the Dark Battle Wolf's bloodline. They were no weaker than bloodline creatures of the same level and tier. During Shifeng's previous life, not even the various superpowers had dared to venture into the Demonwolf mountain range casually. Why are we here, guild leader? This environment even feels ominous for Tier 3 players. We're not here to grind, are we? Kola asked nervously as he watched the numerous wolf packs roam the forest below the flying ship. Since reaching Tier 3, Kola had felt as if he had the strength to toy with level 100 Great Lords, but when he saw the 3-eyed demon wolves below, he sensed the threat of death. The Great Lord ranked 3-eyed demon wolves felt particularly dangerous. Yan Tianxing and the others felt the same, and were just as uncomfortable. We're not here to level. These monsters are cheapskates. They give very little EXP and loot. Moreover, those wolves generally move in packs of 500 or more. Even a 100-man, Tier 3 expert team would be dog food here, not to mention our team, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Then why are we here? Yan Tianxing repeated the question. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Now that Zero Wing had so many Tier 3 experts, they could raid level 100 team dungeons. Yet Shifeng had brought them to this godforsaken place. We're going to open a portal to the Western continent. Shifeng answered, chuckling. If the various superpowers had so many Tier 3 experts under their command right now, they'd definitely start raiding level 100 team dungeons or powerful field bosses. It was the easiest way to gain more level 100 weapons and equipment, which would enable more of the guild's members to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests. After all, however, Shifeng thought that method was too slow for Zero Wing. His guild didn't have as many experts as the various superpowers, and if he wanted Zero Wing to grow quickly, he had to expend an abundance of resources. The fastest way to acquire these resources was through trade between the 2 continents. Shifeng hadn't had the ability to travel to the Western continent before, but now that Kola and his team had reached Tier 3, Zero Wing had a chance of opening the portal to the other continent. Naturally, Shifeng would take advantage of this opportunity. Chapter 2385. Western Continent. A portal to the Western Continent? Yan Tianxing and the others turned to their guild leader in astonishment. God's domain's various powers were no longer ignorant of the Western Continent, and a few superpowers had already gained the ability to travel between the 2 main continents. The resources these superpowers had returned with had made the various powers jealous. God's domain's continents had very different cultures. Not only did their developmental directions differ, but each continent had largely different resources. Thus, each continent's players could greatly benefit from the other's resources. Based on what Yan Tianxing and his comrades knew, players on the Western continent had very different daily expenditures than those on the Eastern continent. The Eastern continent's players mainly relied on coins as a currency, due to the continent's focus on combat techniques. Naturally, relying on combat techniques in battle placed a huge burden on weapons and equipment, and as a result, players spent a lot of their money on repair fees. On the Western continent, players relied on magic crystals more than coins. The Western continent's players focused more on basic attributes and mana use. Thus, they needed magic crystals to strengthen themselves and their weapons and equipment. Of course, magic crystals were a rare and precious commodity on both continents, but due to the Western continent's developmental direction, magic crystals were worth far more there. In contrast, the materials to produce weapons and equipment were much cheaper than on the Eastern continent. If Zero Wing were able to travel between the 2 continents, it would become a true superpower in no time. That's right. I discovered a hidden clue about a magic gate here, one that's been passed down since ancient times. As long as we activate the magic gate, we'll be able to travel between the continents, Shifeng said. making up a random excuse to avoid suspicion. The various superpowers were desperately searching for ways to travel between the continents, but very few had succeeded. It'd be strange if he discovered a portal by chance. Is the portal stable, guild leader? Iluafe eagerly asked. When they heard Iluafe's question, the rest of the team perked up in curiosity. None of them doubted Shifeng's word. Players had discovered many of God's domain's quests and portals through hidden clues. There was nothing strange about one of these clues leading to a portal connected to the two main continents. Rather, everyone was more curious about whether or not the portal was safe. If it were a single-use portal, it wouldn't be of much help to Zero Wing. At most, they could make a quick buck by reselling the Western continent's resources once. However, if the portal were stable, they could continue to make money until travel between the continents became the norm. The difference between the two would be massive. Based on the clue I found, it should be, Shifeng said. Unfortunately, we'll only know how large the portal is once we activate it. The portal they were looking for was stable, or he wouldn't have bothered to travel all the way out here. But since he had never seen or used the portal personally, he didn't know its exact details. On the eastern continent, the Ten Saints Empire had the most portals that led to the western continent. Based on what Shifeng knew, there were nearly 10 stable portals in the empire, and among them, the largest and most stable was under multiple superpowers' control. That was also the portal most players relied on to travel between the continents. After considering Zero Wing's situation, Shifeng had decided that the Demonwolf mountain range's portal was the best suited for his guild. This portal was incredibly stable. During Shifeng's previous life, a dark power had secretly controlled it. The public had only learned about its existence after travel between the continents had become more commonplace, and the various superpowers had grown to envy the dark power that had controlled this portal. Shifeng's answer excited his team. The guild really wouldn't have to worry about its development if they could secure this portal. While Shifeng and his players conversed, the Crimson Dragon flying ship reached a frozen lake within the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region. A layer of snow covered the frozen lake, which was so large it could easily contain several cities. If the system map hadn't labeled this area as a lake, players would have likely mistaken it for a snowy plain. However, before the Crimson Dragon flying ship began to descend, the team was overwhelmed by an eerie feeling. They looked down at the lake, noticing a large number of frozen humans and beasts. The human sculptures all wore the same armor and clothing, and the weakest among them was Tier 3. If the Ten Saints Empire's players saw these humans' armor, they would have been shocked. The armor and clothing those statues wore were that of the Sacred Brilliance Division, one of the Ten Saints Empire's 7 Mythic Knight divisions. The 7 Mythic Knight divisions had been the Ten Saints Empire's prided source of apex combat power since ancient times. It was rumored that just one of these knight divisions could destroy an entire kingdom. However, these several thousand knights stood, frozen on the lake below. Based on their positions and expressions, it was obvious that these knights had been frozen before they had even begun to prepare for battle. Those were several thousand Tier 3 NPCs they were talking about. Just thinking about the implications of this made Yin Tianxing and his companions shudder. God's domain operated on a system of cause and effect. A group of Tier 3 NPCs wouldn't freeze to death for no reason. Something must have attacked these Sacred Brilliance Division knights. The scene even dumbfounded Shifeng. According to his information, there shouldn't be any NPCs here, let alone one of the 7 Mythic Knight divisions. All he should have needed to do was repair the magic gate and protect it from the monsters in the lake. Look at that statue, guild leader. It seems to be radiating a faint glow, Blackie said as he pointed at an ice sculpture beneath the flying ship. Unlike the other frozen knights, the sculpture Blackie pointed to glowed with a faint golden light. It was also dressed more luxurious than the rest, and gave off a trace of divine might. The divine might didn't originate from an item, but from the NPC himself. A hero? Shifeng was surprised to see the frozen NPC in question. Heroes were apex beings among the human race, and although everyone knew they existed, meeting a living hero was an extraordinarily rare encounter. Most heroes had died ages ago, and only retained a fraction of their original strength. And yet, Shifeng could tell that the frozen hero below him was still alive. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Guild Leader, should we check them out? Blackie asked. Let's go take a look. Shifeng agreed after considering the situation. They didn't really have a choice. The magic gate they were after was sealed under the hero's feet. They couldn't avoid approaching the NPC unless they gave up on the magic gate. Shortly after the Crimson Dragon flying ship landed on the lake, a deep, powerful voice addressed the team. Adventurers, might I trouble you to remove this seal? Shifeng, the team leader, then received a system notification. Chapter 2386, Another Inferior Legendary Quest System. Inferior Legendary Quest, last night triggered. You have 3 minutes to accept the quest or not. You will not be penalized for refusing the quest. System. If you choose to accept the quest and complete it, you will gain Holy Knight Alba Gray's favor. Alba Gray's favorability of you beyond the corresponding reward will depend on the quest's completion rate. System. If you fail to complete the quest, all basic attributes will be permanently decreased by 100 points. You will lose 5 levels, and your reputation in the Ten Saints Empire will be reduced by 500 points. The system notifications repeated 3 times. He's Alba Gray. Shifeng stared at the frozen, middle-aged man before him in astonishment. The penalties for failing the quest didn't particularly surprise him. In fact, for an inferior legendary quest, the penalties were a bit light. Even epic quests had more severe consequences for failure. What truly surprised Shifeng was the hero's name. Alba Gray. Every player in Shifeng's previous life had known this name. Alba Gray had been one of the 8 famed smiths in the past. Before him, even a talented Grandmaster Forger amounted to nothing. The various superpowers had gone crazy over Alba Gray in the past, because only the famed smiths could forge legendary items. The easiest method of obtaining a suitable legendary item was to seek the help of a famed smith. Relying on players to craft such an item was barely a dream. Hence, the various superpowers had done everything they could to gain any of the known famed smiths' favorability. Even Tier 6 God-ranked players would go crazy for a custom-made legendary item. They'd even destroy an entire kingdom to get their hands on one. Unfortunately, gaining a famed smith's favorability was easier said than done. Players would be lucky enough to meet a famed smith, much less earn their favorability. Famed smiths enjoyed even higher status than kings, and even the War God's Temple, one of God's domain's few apex powers, treated such NPCs with great respect. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to earn such an influential individual's favorability. Shifeng had never thought that not only would he meet the legendary Alba Gray here, but he'd even get a chance to earn the NPC's favorability by simply accepting the quest. If the various superpowers of his past life found out about this, they'd kill him out of jealousy. Without any hesitation, Shifeng accepted the inferior legendary quest. He then received another notification stating that his favorability with Alba Gray had increased by 10 points. The rest of the team was also notified of the quest. Are we really going to challenge this inferior legendary quest? Blackie asked, worriedly glancing at the last night quest's rank. Major Powers' upper echelons, like himself, were very familiar with quest's difficulties. He was beyond feeling fortunate just because he accepted a high-rank quest. Great rewards came with great risks in God's domain. Many major powers had suffered grievously for accepting high-ranked quests that they couldn't complete. Some guilds had even destroyed themselves due to uncompleted quests. Meanwhile, not only was the last night an inferior legendary quest, but it was also in such a dangerous location. Even with Zero Wing's 25 Tier 3 players, Blackie wasn't confident in completing the quest. The rest of the team was just as concerned. The weakest monster they had seen in the Demonwolf mountain range had been a level 100 lord, and throughout their journey, they had spotted level 110 plus great lords and grand lords. Aside from Shifeng, they were all new to Tier 3. Furthermore, they had yet to upgrade their weapons and equipment. Just standing in the Demonwolf mountain range was incredibly risky for them, let alone trying to complete an inferior legendary quest. The quest rewards are incredible. Not accepting it would be a waste, Shifeng said, chuckling. He didn't bother to explain his decision, however. We've already reached Tier 3. Even if we fail and lose 5 levels, we can earn them back quickly. Enough worrying. Let's get going. The 10 favorability points they had just gained were far more valuable than the basic attributes and levels they risked losing. Countless superpowers would willingly make such a trade. There were many methods to increasing basic attributes, and gaining levels was even easier. Furthermore, if they completed this quest, they'd gain even more favorability with Alba Gray. Regardless of the outcome, accepting this quest would only benefit players. Only a fool would reject it. Feng then approached Alba Gray, and after a moment of thought, the rest of the team saw their guild leader's reasoning. Now that they had reached Tier 3, their leveling speed was far faster than Tier 2 players. Even if they lost 5 levels, they could recover and maintain their advantage over others relatively easily. Lord Hero, may I know what we need to do to remove your seal? Feng asked Alba Gray. Unfortunately, my night division came across the Jealous Witch at a bad time, and she cursed us adventurers. Since my comrades lacked the protection and blessings of the gods, they died when they were frozen. Although I am protected by the gods, I cannot fully stop the curse from eroding my body. I ask that you collect some of the mana the Jealous Witch left behind in this land. I will also need you to stop the Ice Elf, Ulinium, whom the Jealous Witch left to oversee my demise. That will buy me enough time to break free from the curse. Alba Gray mentally relayed. System: Inferior Legendary Quest, Last Night. Quest Content: Collect 1,000 strands of mana the Jealous Witch left behind in this land to remove Alba Gray's curse. Before removing Alba Gray's curse, you must do all you can to stop the Ice Elf, Ulinium. You have 10 days to complete the quest. The less time you spend completing the quest, the higher the quest's completion rate will be. Feng's teammate gasped when they saw the quest's contents. Crap. This quest is fraudulent. Blackie's face twitched as he read the quest details. Collect 1,000 strands of mana in 10 days? How are we supposed to do that? They were all familiar with the concept of collecting mana for a quest. Normally, players could complete the task by killing Great Lord rank or higher monsters in a specified location. Although killing level 100 Great Lords might be easy with their strength, collecting 1,000 mana strands within 10 days was a joke. Level 100 Great Lords had incredibly high HP. Even their team would need at least 15 minutes to kill one. Although God's Domain's days consisted of 48 hours, they'd have to grind nonstop for 5 days to complete this quest. To make matters worse, Great Lords only had a chance of dropping the required mana. To put it simply, this quest was the system's way of toying with them. It's no wonder why only a few superpowers had earned enough of the famed Smith's favorability to commission an item. Feng couldn't help his bitter smile after listening to Alba Gray's request. Not even a 100-man, Tier 3 team could complete this quest, especially since players had just recently reached level 100. Guild leader, we should call in all of the guild's experts, Yin Tianxing suggested. That's not a viable option, I'm afraid, Feng said, shaking his head. More help would increase their chances of success, but the Ten Saints Empire was quite far from Starmoon Kingdom. The teleportation fees alone would be a huge burden on the guild, and players would need a long time to travel from the Ten Saints Empire to the Demonwolf mountain range. Most importantly, ordinary Tier 2 experts would have no hope of surviving in this forbidden land. But at this rate, we won't be able to complete the quest, Yin Tianxing insisted. He had considered the same issues with his suggestion, but their team of 25 simply couldn't slay enough Great Lords within the time limit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We're not completely out of options, Feng said after giving the matter some thought. Blackie, contact Melancholic and tell her to gather all of the secret silver guards I asked her to find in White River City's Candlelight trading firm. I'll head over right away. While I'm gone, I want the rest of you to collect as many mana strands as possible. He had already instructed Melancholic Smile to locate high-growth potential secret silver guards for him. He had even shared all of the clues he knew of with her. He had intended to use soul strengthening to upgrade these secret silver guards to fine gold rank, and use them to boost Zero Wing's combat power. While secret silver guards could fend off peak experts, they'd be no match for Apex experts. The same couldn't be said of fine gold guards, however, especially a full team of them. If they worked together, fine gold guards could slay domain realm experts as easily as playing with children. Secret silver guards? Shifeng's order confused Blackie. He didn't understand why Shifeng would want a bunch of secret silver guards, but he did as he was told. Shifeng then boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship and left the Demonwolf mountain range, which prevented any form of teleportation in a hurry. Once he was free of the Forbidden Land, he used a return scroll and teleported to White River City's Candlelight trading firm. Chapter 2387. Strengthening the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. White River City, Candlelight trading firm. Compared to the surrounding player-owned shops and NPC shops, the Candlelight trading firm's 21-story shop loomed a giant overseeing the city's business district. Almost every new visitor to White River City gasped when they saw it. The players that focused on their subclasses gave the magnificent building particularly longing looks. These players' reactions weren't simply because White River City's Candlelight trading firm was a 4-star shop, but also due to Zero Wing's latest announcement. All Zero Wing and Candlelight trading firm members could purchase a private house in Stone Forest City with their GCPs. Even the various superpowers hungered after Stone Forest City's private houses. And because of this announcement, the various major powers players envied Zero Wing and Candlelight's members. Even a fool would recognize the immeasurable future ahead for Stone Forest City. Although a level 100 neutral map was very dangerous, there was no doubt that it was an excellent leveling spot for current players. Furthermore, nowhere within God's domain's many kingdoms and empires could match the city's scenery. With one of the city's private houses, one would have bragging rights for life. Unfortunately, securing a permanent private house in Stone Forest City was easier said than done. Zero Wing had no intentions of selling its private houses to outsiders, only lease them. Once the lease ended, players would have to bid for the house in another auction. And yet, as a member of Zero Wing or Candlelight, one could own their own house in the city. Why wouldn't outsiders be jealous? As Shifeng made his way toward the Candlelight trading firm, his guild emblem, that of Zero Wing's core members, attracted many envious looks, even though he hid his appearance and identity with a black cloak. He's actually a Zero Wing core member? It'd be great if I could get to know him. A level 96 female elementalist said, her eyes glowing brightly as she watched Shifeng pass by. Nowadays, Zero Wing shone like the midday sun in Star Moon Kingdom and its several neighboring kingdoms. Even other kingdoms' major powers had to show respect for the guild. In addition, countless adventurer teams sought to befriend Zero Wing's core members in hopes of gaining some advantage in the Cold Spring Forest. Isn't he just a core member? What's so great about that? A level 97 male shield warrior said in jealousy. If I were willing to deal with the restrictions, I could join Zero Wing and become a core member too. Even for you, that'd be a challenge, the female elementalist said, shaking her head at the disgruntled shield warrior. I've heard that since Zero Wing has so many members now, they've raised the requirement for elite members to the middle stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor. If you wanted to become a core member, you'd have to reach the 6th floor's middle stage at the very least. At this stage of the game, players only needed to reach the late stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor to be considered an expert. There was a huge difference between the 5th and 6th floors. Even in well-known adventurer teams, the experts that could reach the 6th floor's middle stage could be counted on one hand. When he heard the requirement to become a Zero Wing core member, the level 97 shield warrior fell silent. He belonged to a well-known adventurer team from the Black Dragon Empire, and very few of his teammates could reach that stage. He had only recently reached the 5th floor's late stage. He was nowhere strong enough to become a core member in Zero Wing. We've already raised the core member requirements that high? Shifeng was similarly surprised when he overheard the conversation. To ensure that the guild's core members had enough resources to develop, Zero Wing had limited the number of players that could become core members. The guild only had limited resources, especially the rarer resources after all. There simply weren't enough to supply an endless number of members. Of course, exceptions could be made for the players that met the guild's high standards. As far as Shifeng could remember, the minimum requirement to become a core member had been fixed at the early stage of the Trial Tower's 6th floor, with the higher standard of reaching the 6th floor's late stage. If players reached the late stage, they wouldn't have to take part in the core members' monthly elimination competition. But apparently, the minimum requirement had been raised to the 6th floor's middle stage. It was easy to imagine how many experts had recently joined his guild. Shifeng had to admit that using Stone Forest City to promote Zero Wing had been amazingly effective. Moreover, as time passed, the core membership minimum requirements would become more demanding, and the guild would acquire even more experts. Although Shifeng was pleased with his guild's development, he felt a little pressured. More experts meant greater demand for resources. If the guild failed to meet these experts' needs, it would only be a matter of time before they left the guild as other powers established towns and cities in level 100 neutral maps. Whether or not Zero Wing grew into a superpower would depend on the guild's income of coins and resources. Considering this issue, Shifeng hurried toward the Candlelight trading firm. Melancholic Smile had already gathered the secret silver guards. She had gone to great lengths to find in one of the top-floor basic meditation rooms. As Shifeng entered the room, she promptly handed him a detailed list of these guards. Guild Leader, after scouring the various kingdoms and empires, I managed to find 16 secret silver guards with very high growth potential. I've secured other secret silver guards as well, but their growth potential isn't as high. Melancholic Smile awkwardly reported as she gestured to the row of guards behind her. Shifeng had provided her with plenty of clues, and she had utilized the secret pavilion's connections to follow them. However, even after so many days of searching, she had only found 16 secret silver guards that fit Shifeng's criteria. 16. Shifeng was ecstatic with her results. Finding secret silver guards wasn't easy. They all had a considerably high chance of reaching Tier 4, after all. Even after 10 years in God's domain, not even first-rate guilds had been able to afford to take a Tier 4 combatant lightly. Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts were far too rare. As for second- and third-rate guilds, they had been wise to fear Tier 4 combatants. Melancholic Smile simply didn't realize how amazing her accomplishment was. Shifeng instructed Melancholic Smile to continue her hunt for secret silver guards with high growth potential and materials for the Crimson Dragon flying ships. Meanwhile, he snuck the 16 secret silver guards to the shop's second basement floor, where the shop's private warehouse was located. Only the shop's owner had access to this area. At epic rank, the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment could only strengthen 1 soul per day, but he only had 10 days to complete his inferior legendary quest. At most, he had time to strengthen 9 secret silver guards. He'd never complete his quest with so few fine gold guards. Hence, Shifeng intended to use the Holy Grail to upgrade the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. Since the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment was bound to his soul, which prevented him from trading it or storing it in a warehouse, he had been afraid of upgrading it. It could also drop if he died. If he lost the literature fragment after upgrading it, he would mourn the loss. However, now that he had risen to Tier 3, he was strong enough to protect himself. Now the chances of someone killing him were extremely low. The Ancient Gods Literature Fragment's abilities were frightening, and if he could evolve it, it'd become an unimaginable benefit to Zero Wing. After carefully retrieving the Holy Grail from its shelf, Shifeng used it to scan the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. A short moment later, a system notification informed Shifeng of the life force required to evolve the literature fragment. He would have to permanently sacrifice 50,000 HP. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You so much. The number took Shifeng by surprise. For Tier 2 players, losing 50,000 HP was fatal, and the evolution wasn't even a guaranteed success. If the evolution failed, then he'd lose 50,000 HP for nothing, which was why Shifeng didn't use the Holy Grail casually. However, Shifeng did not consider the issue for long. Compared to the benefits he could gain from upgrading the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment, losing 50,000 HP was acceptable. After all, the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment wasn't an ordinary epic item, and he currently had nearly 1 million HP. Fortunately, HP wasn't particularly important for a swordsman, and Shifeng knew of many ways in God's domain to increase his HP permanently. Evolve! Shifeng growled, gritting his teeth. As he did, the Holy Grail plundered 50,000 HP from Shifeng and converted it into purple-blue smoke that enveloped the ancient god's literature fragment. Chapter 2388. Evolution effects suspended in mid-air. The ancient god's literature fragment radiated a golden light as it hungrily devoured the purple-blue smoke. As the literature fragment absorbed more of the smoke, the engraved divine runes sharpened. The surrounding mana began to flow toward the literature fragment as well. After 10 seconds of this, the divine runes on the ancient god's literature fragment had completed, fully repaired, and it radiated far stronger divine might than before. What a powerful aura! Shifeng began to grow excited as he sensed the literature fragment's divine might. The strength of the divine might meant the literature fragment had been upgraded, and the process was a success. Eagerly, Shifeng clicked to inspect the ancient god's literature fragment. Ancient god's literature fragment. Page V. Epic rank item. An ancient parchment that has undergone the baptism of time. The divine runes have been fully restored by the Holy Grail and contain unbelievable power. Summon heroic spirit. Sacrifice a portion of the user's soul to summon 18 ancient heroic warriors to do battle. The summoned heroic warriors will be one tier higher than the user up to tier 3. Duration: 12 hours cooldown. 3 natural days. A weakened soul cannot conduct the summoning. Skill 2 Soul Absorption. Absorbs the souls of half-dead creatures for a high chance to generate a drop of soul essence. Cooldown: 3 hours. Stronger targeted creatures increase the chances of generating soul essence. Skill 3 Soul Strengthening. Consume soul essence to strengthen a creature's soul. Cooldown: 3 hours. Stronger targeted creatures require more soul essence for soul strengthening. Skill 4 Divine Resonance. Automatically detects any ancient god's literature fragments within a 1,000-yard radius. This item is bound to the owner's soul and cannot be traded or stored in a warehouse. This fragment also has a chance of dropping on death. Drops on death if in a weakened soul state. Why is it still epic rank? Shifeng was confused when he saw the ancient god's literature fragment statistics. In terms of abilities, the upgraded ancient god's literature fragment was stronger than some of the fragmented legendary items Shifeng had seen. In fact, if the various superpowers found out about the literature fragment's current abilities, they'd likely offer to trade several fragmented legendary items for it. Yet, despite such abilities, the ancient god's literature fragment was still an epic item. It was unbelievable. Sure enough, I'll need to collect more fragments if I want to upgrade its rank, Shifeng concluded. The ancient god's literature was a divine tome which numerous ancient gods had written. It had the power to decimate the heavens and earth. Trying to upgrade a single fragment to fragmented legendary rank was simply unrealistic. However, Shifeng was satisfied with the results. With the minor strengthening, the literature fragment's summon heroic spirit skill had massively improved. The skill was enough to make him a one-man army. Furthermore, soul absorption and soul strengthening's cooldowns had shortened significantly. Every one of the changes had exceeded Shifeng's expectations. Most importantly, his ancient god's literature fragment now had the ability to locate other fragments within range. This effect would make it much easier to compile the fragments. If he could complete the tome, the ancient god's literature would benefit the guild far more than 4 or 5 more fragmented legendary items. Following which, Shifeng stored the Holy Grail and turned to face the secret silver guards behind him. These secret silver guards weren't like monsters like Anna and Kite. Each only needed 3 drops of soul essence for their first soul strengthening. Fortunately, Shifeng had collected over 100 drops, so he could strengthen all 16 secret silver guards at least once. With 16 fine gold guards and Anna and Kite's strength, he could move through the Demonwolf mountain range unhindered. Shifeng wasted no time as he began to chant the soul strengthening's incantation and target the elementalist before him. A 5-fold magic array, one far stronger than the one that had appeared when Shifeng had strengthened Kite's soul, immediately appeared under the elementalist's feet. The array even absorbed mana from its surroundings and the void at least 3 times faster than it had with Kite. Very quickly, a fist-sized ball of liquid mana appeared before the Elementalist. This ball of mana melted into the Elementalist's forehead, and the secret silver guard released a bone-piercing howl. Although the Elementalist was in pain, Sherfong could clearly sense the guard's aura rapidly growing stronger. This excruciating process continued for 5 seconds. By the time the ball of liquid mana and the Elementalist had merged completely, the Elementalist felt like a completely different person. To Sherfong, the level 103, Tier 3 Great Mage had only felt slightly threatening, but now, even he'd have to tread carefully in a fight with this NPC. This NPC improved so drastically. Sherfong could not believe his eyes when he saw the Great Mage's statistics. Previously, the Great Mage had only had 78 growth potential, which was considerably high for a Secret Silver Guard. Secret Silver Guard's growth potential only ranged between 71 and 80, and this Great Mage had only been 3 points away from Fine Gold rank. When Sherfong used Soul Strengthening on Kite, the NPC's growth potential had only risen by 2 points. While Sherfong had expected a greater increase for a Secret Silver Guard, he had only expected a 3 or 4 point increase at best. However, the Great Mage's growth potential had risen by 5 points, to 83. The Great Mage had crossed the Fine Gold threshold and more. Every additional point of growth potential was significant to personal guards. At 83, a personal guard could perfectly suppress an apex expert of the same level and tier. Sherfong couldn't help his growing excitement. With the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment's new strength, he could even elevate Secret Silver Guards with 76 growth potential to Fine Gold rank. Now Zero Wing could amass a small army of Fine Gold Guards. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Sherfong immediately contacted Melancholic Smile, and had her send him the guild's Secret Silver Guards with at least 76 growth potential to the basic meditation room on the top floor. Guild leader, those guards are currently protecting Silverwing Town. I'm afraid that I'll need some time to find temporary replacements and recall them all to White River City, Melancholic Smile said. Of the Secret Silver Guards she had found, she had ordered those that met Sherfang's requirements to stand guard in White River City. She had sent the rest to defend Silverwing Town in the meantime. Secret Silver Guards had incredible combat power, and once they reached level 100, they could complete their promotion to Tier 3. They were an excellent deterrent in the Chaotic or Empire. Don't worry about it. Just recall them all here, Sherfong said. He did not mind waiting. The upgraded Soul Strengthening still had a 3-hour cooldown, and it would take a full natural day to strengthen the 16 Secret Silver Guards before him. All right, I'll start making the necessary arrangements, Melancholic Smile said, not giving the matter much thought. She then contacted the core members that owned the Secret Silver Guards in question. Chapter 2389. Fine Gold Team. While Sherfong waited quietly for Silverwing Town's Secret Silver Guards to arrive in the top-floor basic meditation room, Liangjing contacted him. Guild leader, we've got trouble in the Dark Knight Empire. Liangjing exclaimed. The Dark Knight Empire? What's happened? Sherfong asked when he saw Liangjing's anxious expression. Although Zero Wing hadn't been developing in the Dark Knight Empire for long, it had received help from Unyielding Soul. Because of that, both Zero Wing's strength and the Candlelight trading firm's business had been progressing relatively smoothly, and thanks to Stone Forest City, more of the Empire's experts sought to join Zero Wing. Moreover, Starlink hadn't been able to do anything drastic against Zero Wing for fear of unexpected attacks from Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor. Hence, Zero Wing's branch in the Dark Knight Empire was booming. Starlink has established a city at the Gloomy Hills, a map near the Gloomy Ruin, a level 100 neutral map. Moreover, Starlink has announced that it is opening the city to all of its Adventurer Alliance's members. Many of the Empire's experts are siding with Starlink because of this, and some experts and adventurer teams that had been thinking of joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance have changed their minds, Liangjing explained. In addition, the Dark Knight Empire's various major powers have started to side with Starlink. Even Crimson Emperor is considering a partnership. Starlink has also announced that it will lease its new city's private houses with a starting bid of only 10,000 credits per week. Even many of Starmoon Kingdom's major powers and adventurer teams have been discussing the idea of shifting their development to the Dark Knight Empire. The fact that Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor held Starlink back was a large part of the reason for Zero Wing's survival in the Dark Knight Empire. In addition, the Dark Knight Empire's various major powers had sided with Zero Wing to keep Starlink in check. Hence, the most Starlink had been able to do was pressure Zero Wing's territory in the Empire. However, if Crimson Emperor and the various major powers sided with Starlink, the Zero Wing's members in the Empire would be in danger. Furthermore, now that Starlink had a city in the Gloomy Hills, Zero Wing's experts couldn't operate in the level 90+ resource map. Needless to say, this also made it impossible for the guild members to reach the Gloomy Ruin. And with Starlink's bounty still in effect, a large number of independent experts and adventurer teams would target Zero Wing's members. If this persisted, it wouldn't be long before Zero Wing could no longer survive in the Dark Knight Empire. Zero Wing had already grown to a substantial size, and there were only so many high-level maps in each country. The high-level maps available around Starmoon Kingdom weren't enough to fulfill Zero Wing's needs. Although the Cold Spring Forest was rich in resources, very few guild members were strong enough to grind in a level 100 neutral map right now. At this stage of the game, a grinding team would need a peak expert to lead it if it wanted to survive in such an area. Unfortunately, unlike the various superpowers, Zero Wing only had a small number of peak experts. The majority of the guild's players would still need some time to grind in level 90+ maps. Starlink wants to gather both manpower and resources? Shifeng had a rough idea of what the enemy guild planned after listening to Liang Jing's report. Starlink's new city might not be as impressive as Stone Forest City, but it was near a level 100 neutral map. It would also be quite useful to players who wanted to explore the Gloomy Ruin, and Starlink was accepting far cheaper rent for the private houses in its new city. It was enough to tempt many players. However, this wasn't good news for Zero Wing, which needed credits and resources. What should we do, guild leader? At this rate, not only will we earn less income from our private houses, but more experts will target our guild members as well, Liang Jing said. The opportunity to enter Stone Forest City was a large part of the reason that the Starmoon Adventurer Alliance had attracted so many experts, but only silver and higher-ranked members could take advantage of that opportunity. On the other hand, Starlink gave all of its Adventurer Alliance's members access to its new city. Naturally, this would make the Starmoon Adventurer Alliance less attractive to independent experts. Starlink's Adventurer Alliances would also gain more independent experts to target Zero Wing's members. Lu Xinglua is sacrificing his new guild city just to deal with us? I guess he really wants this to be a fight to the death, Shifeng said, frowning. Since he wants a war of resources, I'll play with him until he's satisfied. Make the arrangements. From now on, half the number of CPs required to become a silver member in the Starmoon Adventurer Alliance, and will hold auctions for the Crimson Sunsets. However, only silver members and above will be allowed to participate, and the starting bid will be 30,000 magic crystals and 10,000 gold. We're auctioning the Crimson Sunsets. Liang Jing could not help but gasp. But guild leader, those are a part of our guild's foundation. Our guild members also need those to survive in level 100 neutral maps. If we sell the Crimson Sunsets, nothing was more important than one's strength to the various powers and players. If the Starmoon Adventurer Alliance auctioned off the Crimson Sunsets to its members, there was no doubt that experts and adventurer teams would swarm to join the alliance. However, the Crimson Sunsets were an advantage Zero Wing's members needed over other players. If they auctioned the Crimson Sunsets to the public, they'd only help other players rapidly improve, which wouldn't benefit Zero Wing's development. It's fine. The Crimson Sunset might be valuable, but it is still a consumable. Moreover, as players reach higher levels, it'll become less valuable. Since the various superpowers experts have started to reach level 100, this is the perfect opportunity to sell the sets, Shifeng said, chuckling. Before this, he would have hesitated to make such a decision, but he didn't mind now. Now he had an even stronger trump card to assure Zero Wing's advantage in the Cold Spring Forest. The Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. With so many fine gold guards, Zero Wing wouldn't have to worry about the various superpowers peak experts. Giving the matter some thought, Liang Jing agreed with Shifeng. Besides, Zero Wing didn't have a better option to stop Starlink from poaching its potential members. She disconnected the call and immediately saw to Shifeng's orders, publishing a public announcement regarding the Crimson Sunsets auction on the notice boards in the Star, Moon Adventurer Alliance's residences. When players noticed the announcement, it caused a sensation throughout the Adventurer Alliance. Crap! Zero Wing is too amazing. A Tier 2 mana set equipment. If I had a Crimson Sunset, I could challenge my Tier 3 promotion quest right away. The Star Moon Adventurer Alliance's members were astonished when they saw the Crimson Sunset's attributes. None of them had ever thought that Zero Wing would have such powerful equipment. The experts and adventurer teams that had considered joining Starlink's Adventurer Alliances changed their minds instantly. Some that had even joined Starlink's Adventurer Alliances already made their way to the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance after learning about the Crimson Sunsets. Of course, the various large guilds were just as stunned. Is Zero Wing insane? It's actually selling mana set equipment? Zero Wing is probably panicking. Starlink's new city has dealt quite a blow, after all. These large guilds all thought Zero Wing was foolish to sell the Crimson Sunsets. The guild was practically throwing away a huge advantage. Selling the Crimson Sunset might alleviate Zero Wing's current problems, but it wouldn't benefit the guild in the long run. Moreover, once the Crimson Sunsets were no longer useful, the various adventurer teams and independent experts would return to Starlink's side. While everyone discussed the mana set equipment, Shifeng visited his special forging room to produce more of them while he waited for the Soul Strengthening's cooldown to end. Before long, all 12 secret silver guards with 76 growth potential arrived in White River City's Candlelight trading firm. Including the 16 secret silver guards he already had, Zero Wing would have 28 more fine gold guards in its ranks once he finished strengthening them all. Even 28 secret silver guards would be more than enough combat power for a guild to rule a level 100 neutral map with an iron fist, not to mention 28 fine gold guards. After nearly 2 days, Shifeng had finally strengthened all of the 28 secret silver guards. The smallest improvement had still been a 5-point growth potential increase, while the largest had been a 7-point increase, rising from 79 to 86 growth potential. Even among fine gold guards, 86 growth potential was incredibly rare. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU 28 fine gold personal guards. If the various superpowers of my past knew about this, they'd go mad. Shifeng sighed ruefully as he gazed at the 2 rows of personal guards before him. If he had had so many fine gold guards under his command during his previous life, he wouldn't have even been afraid of standing up to superpowers, let alone first-rate guilds. Fine gold guards were exceptionally rare in God's domain, and every one of them had the potential to reach Tier 5. If they were provided enough resources, fine gold guards could have up to a 40% chance of completing their promotion to Tier 5. Even among the various superpowers, Tier 5 combatants were apex beings. Every one of them was a priceless treasure. Of course, Tier 5 NPCs were even stronger than Tier 5 players. To suppress a single Tier 5 NPC, one would need several players of the same tier. And now he had 28 fine gold guards standing before him, waiting for his commands. Chapter 2390. Powerful Guard Team 10 Saints Empire, Demonwolf Mountain Range. After nearly 2 days of fervent work, Shifeng had produced 50 Crimson Sunsets. When he handed them to Liang Jing, he instructed her to keep 20 sets to gradually auction off in the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, while the rest would be given to Zero Wing's core members. These core members would lead their own grinding teams in the Cold Spring Forest, helping to alleviate the lack of manpower in that area. Shifeng had taken a break from crafting the advanced mana set equipment after giving his new stock to Liang Jing, and he had made his way back to the Demonwolf Mountain Range with his 28 newly upgraded fine gold guards. Although the Crimson Sunset would help resolve Zero Wing's need for manpower in the Cold Spring Forest, it was a temporary solution. Moreover, Shifeng was the only person capable of producing the Crimson Sunsets, and he couldn't forge enough of them for Zero Wings members to secure a firm foothold in the Cold Spring Forest. He needed to take care of the root of this problem. The simplest method to do so was to secure a portal to the Western continent and acquire a large amount of the Western continent's resources. Crafting level 100+ weapons and equipment in God's domain was an arduous task, especially for secret silver rank and above. The required materials were very rare, and obtaining them in bulk was a major challenge. However, through their research, the forgers of Shifeng's previous life had discovered that they could replace some of the rare materials the Eastern Continent's forgers needed to craft level 100+ secret silver and better weapons and equipment with some of the Western Continent's specialty materials. Likewise, some of the Eastern Continent's specialty materials could replace some of the materials the Western Continent's forgers needed. Not only had this discovery allowed the superpowers that could travel between the continents to earn tons of resources and coins, but they had also been able to acquire level 100+ weapons and equipment far sooner than their competitors. Since the various superpowers that had access to intercontinental travel had yet to realize this, and were simply using their advantage to earn resources and coins, Shifeng had to strike while the iron was hot. If he waited until these superpowers learned this secret, it had become far more challenging to purchase the Western continent's specialty materials in bulk. These specialty materials were essential to crafting level 100+ weapons and equipment at secret silver rank and higher, and if this secret got out, the various powers would try to collect and hoard the materials, rather than sell them. If Shifeng waited too long, he'd only be able to purchase materials from independent players and adventurer teams, which would limit his collection rate. After piloting the Crimson Dragon flying ship through the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region for about 15 minutes, Shifeng finally located Kola and his team, who were engaged in a battle against several hundred battle wolves. After the past 2 days of grinding in the mountain range, Kola and the others had risen to level 101. If the various Tier 2 experts heard that this team could gain a full level every 2 days, they'd be incredibly jealous. However, Kola and his team weren't having an easy time against these battle wolves, especially as they fought the Alphas, the two-headed battle wolves. Two-headed battle wolf, demonic creature, Great Lord, level 108 HP 270, 000, 000/270, 000, 000. Although the two-headed battle wolves had average HP for monsters of their rank and level, these monsters possessed the Dark Battle Wolf's bloodline. Their defense and agility were just as high as actual bloodline creatures, and their combat standards were on par with the Trial Tower's 5th floor. If a Tier 2 peak expert tried to take on a two-headed battle wolf, they wouldn't last more than a few exchanges. Furthermore, the Demonwolf mountain range's wolves tended to move in packs of 300 to 400, and around 24 two-headed battle wolves led each pack. Although the rest of the battle wolves were only Lord-ranked monsters, they could even pose a threat to Tier 3 players when a dozen of them worked together. Although Kola and his companions had reached Tier 3, they still had to be careful, or members of the team would fall. The team had yet to upgrade their weapons and equipment, and had to rely on their epic weapons and equipment to support them in the fight. If Kola and his team had Tier 3 standard equipment, they'd have no issues taking a pack of battle wolves out. Check it out! The guild leader is back. Blackie was excited when he noticed the approaching Crimson Dragon flying ship. With only 24 players, their team had faced plenty of trouble while fighting these battle wolves over the past 2 days. Not even the magical class players' powerful AoE attacks could alleviate the pressure. These battle wolves were too smart. Once they sensed a player casting an AoE spell, they split up, preventing the spell from hitting too many of them. But if Shifeng joined the battle wolves would be much easier to defeat. As the team members looked up at the flying ship, they saw over 24 figures jump from the ship's deck. Every one of those figures' frightening auras made Kola and his companions' hearts skip a beat. NPCs. How are these NPCs so strong? The team was shocked and confused as they stared at the Tier 3 NPCs that had disembarked. The idea of challenging ordinary Tier 3 NPCs no longer fazed them now that they were Tier 3, as well. They had superior combat standards after all. However, even Yen Tianqing shuddered when he saw the 28 Tier 3 NPCs that had jumped from the Crimson Dragon flying ship. His instincts even warned him to flee. Before Kola and his companions could react, the personal guards charged at the surrounding battle wolves. Taking the lead, the dozen or so melee NPCs dispersed the crowding wolves with their charge instantly. They even sent the Great Lord-ranked two-headed battle wolves flying. The magical class NPCs then followed with a round of spells, each dealing over -1 million damage. The Lord-ranked battle wolves lost 1/3 of their HPs in that single bombardment, while the Great Lords had lost 1/10 of their HPs. The ferocity of the Fine Gold Guard's attacks easily outshone Iluafe's, a Tier 3 magical class player. After about 3 minutes, the 300+ Lord-ranked battle wolves and 20+ Great Lord-ranked two-headed battle wolves had been slain, leaving only a bunch of items behind. Kola and the others were dumbfounded. Normally, they needed over an hour to defeat a battle wolf pack. Yet these 28 NPCs had done so in 3 minutes. The difference between their combat power was massive. From his position on the Crimson Dragon flying ship, Sherfong leveled from 104 to 105 after the battle ended, crossing the first minor threshold after level 100. Where did you find so many powerful NPCs, guild leader? Kola asked once Sherfong had descended from the flying ship. Yen Tianqing and the others were just as curious, waiting for Sherfeng's reply. An ordinary Tier 3 NPC could serve as a small city's magistrate in God's domain. Yet Sherfong had managed to employ so many of them, and every one of them was extraordinarily strong. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. From what Kola and the others could tell, 5 or 6 of these NPCs would be more than enough to annihilate their team of 24. If they had these 28 NPCs help, they could explore the Demonwolf mountain range without issue. How could I possibly afford the help of Tier 3 NPCs? These are our guild's personal guards, Sherfong said, chuckling. Personal guards? The explanation stunned Yen Tianqing. How is that possible? Not even Tier 3 personal guards can be this powerful. Yen Tianqing had encountered the guild's Tier 3 personal guards before, and he had been confident of putting up a fight against the guild's Tier 3 secret silver guards. If he faced any of the personal guards standing behind Sherfong, however, he'd be able to do nothing but flee. Of course, these aren't ordinary Tier 3 personal guards. They are all fine gold guards, Sherfong continued with a grin. Chapter 2391, Pioneering Benefit Fine Gold Guards. These are all fine gold guards. Kola and the others gasped and stared with wide eyes at the 28 personal guards behind Sherfong. They all knew how rare fine gold guards were. Not even some first-rate guilds had a single fine gold guard at this stage of the game, and at most, the various superpowers had 1 or 2. The various superpowers treated their fine gold guards like family heirlooms, and when these personal guards reached Tier 3, they'd be treated as a part of the guild's foundation. Fine gold guards were incredibly powerful. Even at Tier 2, they could suppress Tier 2 Apex experts of the same level, and they'd only grow stronger at Tier 3. And yet, Sherfong informed them that the 28 personal guards behind him were all fine gold rank. You're too vicious, guild leader. If we stationed these fine gold guards in the Cold Spring Forest, they'd likely frighten the various superpowers to death, Blackie said, his eyes glowing as he gazed at the fine gold guards. Compared to the various superpowers' shock when they had found out that these players had reached Tier 3, the fact that Zero Wing had 28 fine gold guards would be devastating. Every one of these Tier 3 fine gold guards had even greater combat power than Tier 3 Apex experts. In fact, one of these fine gold guards could take on 2 Apex experts at once. Needless to say, these fine gold guards would easily overwhelm peak experts. Now that Zero Wing had so many fine gold guards, the various superpowers would have to seriously consider the potential losses before moving against Zero Wing, even when their experts reach Tier 3. Alright, let's focus on completing the quest, Sherfong said, chuckling. These 28 fine gold guards might deter the various superpowers from attacking, but if Zero Wing wanted to become truly powerful, it would need to rely on players and resources. There were limits to what a personal guard could accomplish, after all. Right. Our quest. With these 28 fine gold guards, we can now raid the wolf dens we avoided earlier. Kola exclaimed. Their team had only dared to attack the battle wolves in the outer region, 1 pack at a time, but now that they had 28 fine gold guards to help, they could raid the battle wolves' dens. Not only could they collect the mana strands more quickly, but their leveling speed would also skyrocket. No, we're not going to the dens. We'll move to the Demonwolf mountain range's inner area, Shifeng said, shaking his head as he gestured to the mountains in the distance. There were a lot of battle wolves in the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region, but very few of these monsters were great lords or higher. Even with the fine gold guards, they wouldn't be able to collect the necessary mana strands fast enough. They'd be cutting it close if they stayed in the outer region. The inner region might be more dangerous, but there were far more great lords available in the area, which would allow the team to collect mana strands far more quickly. Guild leader, the inner region is full of level 110 plus monsters, including plenty of great lords and mythic monsters, Yan Tianqing said worriedly. Monsters gained a significant basic attribute boost with each level after level 100, and the monsters in the Demonwolf mountain range had even greater combat standards than their counterparts in other areas of God's domain. If their team accidentally encountered a level 110 plus mythic monster in the inner region, they'd risk annihilation, even if they had the help of 28 fine gold guards. They had only recently reached level 101, and the personal guards, on average, were only level 103, with a few at level 104. Relax. We're only going to explore the border between the inner and outer regions, Shifeng said. Besides, we don't just have 28 fine gold guards on our side. To prove his point, Shifeng pulled 2 summon guard scrolls from his bag and summoned Kite and Anna. After questing on their own for a while, Kite and Anna had reached level 108 and 109, respectively. They were only slightly lower leveled than the monsters in the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region. The team relaxed when they saw Kite and Anna's levels. Although neither of the NPCs had crossed the level 110 threshold, they all knew how powerful these two were. Both had dark gold rank growth potential, and were far more powerful than the fine gold guards. With the 30 personal guards, the team was fully capable of raiding level 110 plus Grand Lords. Following which, the team climbed aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship, and made their way toward the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region. A white mist and constant snowstorms bombarded the inner region throughout the year, limiting visibility. Even Tier 3 players couldn't see farther than 400 yards away. If players were not careful, they could easily fall prey to monster ambushes. However, Shifeng was relatively familiar with the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region, and he piloted his flying ship toward one of the snow-capped forests in the area. Not only was visibility here much better than in other areas of the inner region, but these monsters only ranged between level 110 and 112. Moreover, the wolf packs in the forest tended to keep their distance from each other, so they wouldn't have to worry about attracting too many monsters while they fought. Kola, I want your group to gather the mobs. Tianqing, your group will lure the alpha away from the main group. Everyone else, prioritize the mobs, then target the alpha once they're dead. Shifeng said as he watched a nearby pack. B/B, Two-Headed Frostwolf. Demonic creature, Great Lord, level 110 HP 290 000 000/290 000 000 Frostwolf Chieftain. Demonic creature, Grand Lord, level 112 HP 750 000 000/750 000 000. The wolf pack they faced only had around 200 members or so, 40 of which were Great Lords and 1 was a Grand Lord. An ordinary Tier 3 team would have trouble with this pack, but taking these wolves down should be easy for them. Kola, Turtledove, and Yi Wumian immediately split up and approached the pack from different directions. They herded the wolves into one big group before Yan Tianqing, Flying Shadow, and the rest of the assassins on the team ambushed the Frostwolf Chieftain, securing its aggro and luring it away from the pack's protection. As soon as the Frostwolf Chieftain and the pack were separated, Anna and the other magical classes on the team bombarded the Frostwolves with their spells. The remaining melee members then formed a defensive line, preventing the Frostwolves from reaching the ranged players. After 24 rounds of attacks, only the Great Lord ranked Two-Headed Frostwolves remained standing. The rest of the Frostwolves lay dead in the snow. With them down, a significant portion of the pressure on the melee classes lifted. After another 10 minutes, every Frostwolf had died, except for the Frostwolf Chieftain. The team's experience bars had risen by a large chunk after killing over 200 Frostwolves, which was a much faster leveling speed than what they had enjoyed in the outer region. They had also acquired 14 mana strands from the Frostwolves. Once Kola claimed the Frostwolf Chieftain's aggro from Yin Tianxing, the team finished the Grand Lord off in less than 5 minutes. Not only did the Frostwolf Chieftain contribute another mana strand, but it also dropped more than 20 items as it died, one of which was a piece of level 105 fine gold equipment. Naturally, the team was excited about their results. After 2 days of endless grinding in the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region, the best loot that had dropped was a few pieces of level 100 secret silver equipment. Yet after killing one Frostwolf chieftain, they had obtained a piece of level 105 fine gold equipment, 2 ranks better than their best prior loot. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We've gotten lucky. This Frostwolf chieftain dropped a piece of the Snowfrost set, a fine gold set equipment for magical class players, Shifeng said, smiling at the level 105 fine gold ranked cloth armor he had picked up. The complete set can be used until level 110. Fine gold set equipment was extremely rare after level 100. The standard equipment for Tier 3 players was limited to fine gold equipment after level 100. Very few experts would be fortunate enough to equip a full fine gold set equipment. Aside from the Snowfrost set piece, the Frostwolf chieftain had dropped 2 pieces of level 105 secret silver equipment. This was definitely a benefit of pioneering the area. Normally, a Grand Lord like the Frostwolf chieftain wouldn't drop such abundant loot. Guild leader, since the Frostwolf chieftain drops pieces of the Snowfrost set, it should drop pieces of other level 105 fine gold set equipment. Based on the results of our earlier scouting efforts, there are several Frostwolf chieftains nearby. We should kill them all, Yin Tianxing suggested. Everyone get ready. Kola lure another Frostwolf chieftain our way, Shifeng said nodding. Chapter 2392. Level Skyrockets with Shifeng's command, Kola eagerly left to lure another Frostwolf chieftain. Meanwhile, the rest of the team got into their battle formations with just as much enthusiasm. Although they had reached Tier 3, most of them wore the same equipment they had when they had reached level 100. They didn't even have many pieces of level 100 fine gold equipment on them, much less level 100 dark gold equipment. They had obtained the majority of their level 100 fine gold equipment during their promotion quests. Their epic weapons and equipment might still have been useful at level 100, but the items hadn't grown any stronger after that point. As they continued to level up, these epic weapons and equipment pieces would become increasingly ineffective. If they could get their hands on level 105 fine gold set equipment now, not only would it significantly increase their basic attributes, but they'd also become strong enough to raid level 100, super large-scale team dungeons. Level 100, super large-scale team dungeons were a major turning point for God's Domain's dungeons, because they dropped level 100 plus dark gold, and epic ranked weapons and equipment. Most importantly, they dropped Tier 3 skill and spell books. They hadn't really understood the importance of skills and spells when they had been Tier 2 players, treating them as supplementary tools for combat. They had mainly relied on their basic attributes, combat techniques, and combat standards in battle. However, they had realized that that ideology was no longer useful after reaching Tier 3. Tier 3 skills and spells were no less important than powerful combat techniques. With a player's mana body, Tier 3 skills and spells would display far more power than Tier 2 skills and spells ever could. This was why, despite their inferior combat standards, Tier 3 NPCs could so easily suppress Tier 3 players of the same level. It wasn't a matter of different basic attributes, but the difference in how many Tier 3 spells and skills one had. If they could learn a large number of Tier 3 skills and spells as well, their combat power would reach new highs. Even if they encountered Tier 3 experts with greater combat standards, they'd be able to defeat their opponents. Meanwhile, after fighting alongside the personal guards, Kola and his companions handled the second Frostwolf pack much easier than the first. This time, they hadn't even needed to lure the Frostwolf chieftain away. They had simply bombarded the Grand Lord and its subordinates together. In the end, the team had annihilated the 200-plus Frostwolves in around a dozen minutes. Although the Frostwolf chieftain hadn't dropped any pieces of the Snowfrost set this time, it had dropped the gloves for the Frostwolf set, a 9-piece, level 105 fine gold set equipment for plate armor classes. When the team's plate armor classes saw the Frostwolf set's attributes, a passionate flame burned in their eyes. Crap! That's not fair. This Frostwolf set is so much better than the Snowfrost set. Its 6-piece set effect increases strength by 20% and the set's level limit to level 120. The full 9-piece set effect even upgrades the set by 1 rank. Blackie exclaimed. Nothing was more troublesome than obtaining level 100+ weapons and equipment for Tier 3 experts like them. Based on the fact that the Frostwolf set could be used until level 120, the complete set ranked at the top even among level 100+ dark gold set equipment. With the full Frostwolf set, a Tier 3 player would have the basic attributes to even rival ordinary Tier 3 NPCs. The Frostwolf set? Feng was just as shocked when he saw the plate armor gloves that radiated a faint, white glow. The Demonwolf Mountain Range's Frostwolf set had been quite famous in his previous life. It had been considered one of the top 10 level 120 dark gold set equipment in God's domain. Even the various superpowers old monsters had coveted the set. However, the Frostwolf set was normally so rare that one could only obtain the pieces by killing the monsters in the Demonwolf Mountain Range's core. And yet it had dropped for his team in the inner region. This was unbelievable. Feng's heart started to pound. He immediately instructed the team to hunt for more Frostwolf chieftains. If they could collect a few Frostwolf sets, they'd have no problems raiding level 100 super large-scale team dungeons. The team continued to grind for 7 consecutive days, during which they had practically killed every Frostwolf chieftain in the Demonwolf Mountain Range's inner region at least once. As a result, Feng had risen from level 105 to 107, while his companions had leveled from 101 to 104. If the various superpowers experts discovered their leveling speed, they'd die from envy. Although the Frostwolves provided a lot of EXP, unfortunately, the Frostwolf set's drop rate was quite low. Even after using Divine Providence before the killing blow, the team had only completed 3 Frostwolf sets. The team had also managed to collect 5 of the Cloth Armor Snowfrost sets, and 5 of the Leather Armor Shadowfrost sets. Aside from the set equipment, the team had obtained over 1,000 pieces of level 100 and level 105 secret silver equipment, a bountiful harvest. They could now afford to gear a 100-man team fully. As for their quests required mana, they had collected 956 strands in total. They were only a few dozen strands away from their target, and they should have no issues completing their quest in time. Meanwhile, the leasing auction for Stone Forest City's private houses had netted massive profits for Zero Wing. On average, each private house had been rented for 150,000 credits per week. After holding several leasing auctions, Zero Wing had earned over 1 billion credits in profit. Not only had this alleviated Zero Wing's desperate need for funds, but it had also allowed the Heaven's Rumble Training Center to set up quite a few virtual combat platforms in Fenglin City, which in turn enabled the guild to recruit more capable internal members. Guild leader, when will you be done with your quest? Recently, Starlink has been expanding rapidly. It also has support from Demon Palace now. Not only has it recruited plenty of experts, but we're seeing more players ambush our members in the fields. Many of the Dark Knight Empire's powers have also chosen to side with Starlink. Our members are even too afraid to set foot in a neutral map. And to make matters worse, the situation has started to affect our development in Star Moon Kingdom. Liang Jing reported, clearly frustrated. Although they had lured many experts into joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance with the Crimson Sunsets, Starlink had countered this by offering even greater benefits. Now, members of Starlink's Adventurer Alliances could purchase the Demonic Hellworld's special legacy for far cheaper. The new benefit had attracted many experts. As a result, Starlink had effectively restricted Zero Wing's resource income, which limited the guild members' leveling efficiency since they needed those materials to brew potions and craft special tools that were essential for grinding in high-level neutral maps. Although Zero Wing could purchase these materials through the Secret Chamber of Commerce, it needed coins to do so, which was by no means a worthwhile trade. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I understand. I'm almost done here. If we need coins, start leasing Stone Forest City's private houses for coins, rather than credits. That should give us enough to hold out for some time. Shifeng decided after giving the matter some thought. I'll return as soon as I've finished my quest. Liang Jing had no choice but to nod and follow Shifeng's instructions. While Shifeng had conversed with Liang Jing, an abandoned, ancient magic array lit with a colorful brilliance in a forbidden land on the eastern continent. As the rainbow of lights faded, several figures emerged from the magic array. Despite the very thin mana in the forbidden land, a dense layer of mana enveloped these several individuals. In fact, due to their arrival, the surrounding mana density had substantially increased. So this is the eastern continent. Chapter 2393. Demonwolf Mountain Ranges. Secret Demonwolf Mountain Range. Howling Wind Canyon. Shifeng and his team stood on the mountainside, fighting fervently to fend off a large pack of demon wolves coming up from the foot of the mountain. This pack was larger than any of the Frostwolf packs they had encountered before, with thousands of members. Moreover, every demon wolf was level 110 or higher, including level 114 demon wolves. Many of these beasts were great lords, and there were a few grand lords in the pack. None of the team members could afford to rest lest the demon wolf pack overwhelm them. If not for the fine gold guards blocking the only path up the mountain, and Anna using a magic array to suppress the demon wolves, these beasts would have devoured Shifeng and his team long ago. Guild leader, this is an amazing place to grind. Pack after pack of these demon wolves are running at us. Our leveling speed here is even faster than when we were grinding frost wolves, Blackie said, grinning when he saw another pack of demon wolves approach the foot of the mountain. I bet we can even reach level 105 in less than a day of grinding here. Compared to when they had grinded frost wolves, their current leveling speed was on an entirely different level. They had invested a lot of time in their hunt for frost wolves, but they didn't need to chase down demon wolves, which regularly called for reinforcements. They simply needed to station the melee fine gold guards on the front line while the rest of the team attacked from a safe distance. These beasts are at least level 110. If we stay here, we can maintain our leveling speed until we reach the same level. If we do, we won't even have to fear the various superpowers experts when they catch up to Tier 3, Yan Tianqing said, his eyes glowing with excitement. It was true that Zero Wing had gained a massive advantage when they had reached Tier 3 so early, but Yan Tianqing understood that the various superpowers had far more and stronger experts than his guild. Zero Wing's advantage over the various superpowers was only temporary. Once the superpowers experts finished their promotion quests as well, Zero Wing would be at a disadvantage. He had constantly been concerned about this. Zero Wing's feud with Starlink was still happening, and the various powers invading from the other worlds couldn't be underestimated. Every one of these powers was eyeing the resources in level 100 neutral maps in Stone Forest City. However, this expedition had alleviated some of his concerns. After reaching Tier 3 in God's domain, the basic attributes players earned with each level up wouldn't have as much of an impact on a player's performance as it used to. Rather, weapons, equipment, and combat standards would have a more prominent effect on players' combat power. However, by leveling up quickly, Zero Wing's peak experts would have more time for high-ranked quests, which would allow them to upgrade their weapons, equipment, and combat standards sooner. With a level advantage, they had a chance of contending with the various superpowers experts and stabilizing Zero Wing's position. How can a level 100 neutral map have such a wonderful place? Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw his teammates' passionate expressions after Yan Tianqing had mentioned the possibility of reaching level 110 so soon. There's no lack of monsters in this area, but remaining here will be taxing on our stamina and concentration. We can't stay for too long. Shifeng had already known about this area and its demon wolves, but he hadn't led the team here earlier because of the atmosphere's burden on players' stamina and concentration. Considering those factors, their grinding efficiency here wasn't that much better than grinding Frostwolf packs. Moreover, the Frostwolves dropped better loot than Demon Wolves. However, Zero Wing's current predicament wouldn't permit him to remain in the Demonwolf mountain range for long, which had led to his decision to grind the Demonwolves. The team members couldn't help but glance at their stamina and concentration gauges, and just as Sherfeng had warned them, they noticed that they were consuming twice as much as they had while grinding Frostwolves. They really wouldn't be able to fight the Demonwolves for very long. Of course, the environment here isn't all bad. It does increase our stamina and concentration consumption rates, but it is also the perfect pace to adapt to our mana bodies and train with our Tier 3 skills and spells. You'll rarely find such an opportunity elsewhere, Sherfeng said, smiling when he saw everyone's disappointment. The Demonwolf mountain range was no ordinary forbidden land. It was a prized location for players to train after reaching Tier 3, especially since it was infested with berserk Demonwolves. Not only was the map full of chaotic energy, which was much stronger here, but that energy also disrupted mana. It was the perfect situation to help players adapt to their mana bodies. The mana body was the biggest difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3. The mana body could also be referred to as a player's mana pool. Players with mana bodies controlled mana in an entirely different way than players without. At Tier 2, players used the ambient mana to power their skills and spells, but once they reached Tier 3, they'd use the mana inside themselves as well. This was why Tier 3 skills and spells were so much more powerful than those at Tier 2. However, using the mana within one's body wasn't easy. Players would need a certain level of understanding of their own mana body. Meanwhile, players would struggle to use the ambient mana in environments with chaotic energy, and as such, they'd be forced to rely on the mana within them. This was why such environments were so helpful to players as they adapted to their mana bodies. Indeed, I can sense my mana a little more clearly now. The effects aren't as apparent, but I'm finding it easier to use my own mana now, Iluafe said. After she had reached Tier 3, something had felt wrong when she had cast her Tier 3 spells, but she had brushed it off, assuming it was simply due to how unfamiliar she was with her Tier 3 physique. However, it seemed that sense of wrongness had been a result of her lack of control with her mana body, which had limited her ability to cast her Tier 3 spells. When the rest of the team realized this, they adjusted their approach as they attacked the charging Demonwolves. They started to focus on their own mana while they attacked, using this opportunity to adapt. After 2 hours of practice, the team saw significant improvements to their completion rates with their Tier 3 skills and spells. On average, the team members increased their completion rates by 4%, enough to push many of them across the 80% threshold. Iluafe, Zhao Yueru, and Alluring Summer improved the most, with all three reaching past an 85% spell completion rate. Everyone on the team grew ecstatic. They had never realized that the Howling Wind Canyon would be such an extraordinary training ground. Even Sherfeng managed to learn some new tricks. He had only had a bronze-ranked mana body in the past, and now that he had an epic mana body, the way he conducted mana had changed. Inspired, he could now manipulate his body with greater precision. He even gained a new understanding of his physical control in the real world. By the time the team only needed 19 more mana strands, Kola and his companions had reached level 105, crossing the first minor threshold past level 100. Without hesitation, Sherfeng handed the 3 Frostwolf sets to Kola, Turtledove and Shadowsword, which gave the 3 a large boost to their basic attributes. The defense and basic attributes are so high. I feel like I can even tank a level 110 mythic monster now, Kola exclaimed as he examined his newfound strength. Sherfeng also gave the Frost Shadow and Snowfrost sets to Yan Tianxing, Iluafe, and the rest. With their new equipment, these players' basic attributes were only slightly lower than those of ordinary Tier 3 NPCs. Armed with appropriate equipment, the team slew the incoming Demonwolves far faster than before. As a result, they collected mana at a much faster rate. Guild leader, my group is almost out of stamina and concentration, Blackie announced, sounding tired. My group's running out of gas as well, Yan Tianxing added. Although the team members all had high-ranked mana bodies, they couldn't completely resist the effects of the violent mana in the area. If players with a bronze mana body tried to take their place, they would have run out ages ago. Let's retreat for now since everyone's exhausted, Sherfeng decided after seeing that they only needed 3 more mana strands to complete their quest. They could easily collect the rest on their way back to Alba Grey. Shifeng then retrieved the Crimson Dragon flying ship for everyone to board and rest. Once they boarded, the team found rooms to rest in and logged out of the game. Meanwhile, Shifeng piloted the flying ship back to the Demonwolf mountain range's outer area. Once he had reached the safety of the outer area, Shifeng received a call request from Liangjing. Has Starlink done something again? Shifeng asked. It hadn't been long since the last time she had called. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There's nothing new from Starlink, but I just received a message from Chairman Xiao regarding a problem in the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. He says that a group of people has shown up demanding a challenge, and they've already injured quite a few of our advanced disciples, Liangjing said. Challengers? Shifeng asked. Has Master Lei Bao not taken care of them? The Heaven's Rumble Training Center had no lack of challenges since so many people wanted to use Heaven's Rumble as a stepping stone to earn fame in Fenglin City overnight. However, Shifeng normally let Xiao Yu and Lei Bao take care of these issues. I've heard that Master Lei Bao lost in just 3 moves. Chairman Xiao only contacted me after he had run out of options, Liangjing said. They even defeated Lei Bao? The news surprised Shifeng. Who is the challenger? Since he had begun training with Zero Wing, Lei Bao had grown considerably stronger. Even among Apex internal force experts, few were his match. No one knows, and the training center is in an uproar over it. Chairman Xiao is hoping that you can send Fire Dance to take care of this, Liangjing said. No need. I'll visit the training center myself, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Fire Dance and the others were still in the midst of their Tier 3 promotion quest, so leaving their virtual gaming cabins wasn't convenient right now. Moreover, Shifeng was curious to find out who was strong enough to defeat Lei Bao. Chapter 2394. Powerful Assault Fenglin City, Heaven's Rumble Training Center. As Shifeng arrived at Heaven's Rumble Training Center's top-floor training hall, he was greeted by the sight of a large number of people. They were split into 2 groups. A large group of Heaven's Rumble's disciples, and a smaller group of 3 men and 2 women. The training center's members wore tense expressions as they stared at the smaller group on the opposite side of the hall in fear. The 3 men and 2 women appeared quite young. The oldest didn't look like he had even reached 30, while the youngest of these strangers seemed to be in their early 20s. However, these 5 visitors' auras made them stand out. The eldest of the group, a man with even more bulk than Feng Mingyu, the strongest member of the Feng family's younger generation, felt like a volcano. When Shifeng entered the hall, everyone's attention shifted to him. Hallmaster. Lei Bao greeted Shifeng with an apologetic expression. Shifeng had requested that Lei Bao serve as the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's acting hallmaster, and continued to supply training resources. The older man had even received quite a few bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids, and yet, a bunch of youngsters had defeated him in 3 moves, and he had been forced to request Shifeng's presence. How are your injuries? Shifeng asked, noticing that Lei Bao seemed a bit weaker than normal. It's nothing serious, just a few minor sprains. I'll be fine after some rest, Lei Bao said. However, you should be careful. These people aren't ordinary fighters, especially the young man leading the group. His strength is inhuman. He even took my full-powered punch and avoided injury. At this point, Lei Bao was shocked and afraid of the gorilla-like youth leading the small group of visitors. He was extraordinarily strong. Not even a neutralizing grandmaster could take his full-powered hit and emerge unscathed. However, when he had punched that youth, it had felt as if he had hit a steel wall. While Lei Bao informed Shifeng of the recent events, the young woman in a red dress beside the gorilla youth walked over. We meet again, Hallmaster Shi, the young woman said, smiling faintly. I hadn't had the chance to introduce myself the last time we met. My name is Feng Shirhan, one of mythology's vice guild leaders. I am also the Qilin Corporation's representative. I've come to negotiate a partnership. Mythology. Liangjing stared at the young woman with wide eyes. Liangjing was no longer a stranger to the virtual gaming world. After joining Zero Wing, she had thoroughly researched both the virtual gaming world and God's domain in particular. She knew about mythology, one of the 5 great super guilds in the virtual gaming world. Mythology stood at the apex of the virtual gaming world. However, Liang Jing had never dreamed that the Feng family would have connections with the Super Guild. Even Shifeng gave Feng Shirhan a surprised look. However, he wasn't surprised to hear about mythology, but because he had never heard about Feng Shirhan being one of the Super Guild's vice-guild leaders during his previous life. Partnership? What kind of partnership? Shifeng asked. Mythology's influence in God's domain goes without saying, and I'm sure you can see for yourself the guild's training capabilities, Feng Shirhan said as she gestured to the gorilla of a man behind her. Smiling, she continued. Mythology intends to develop on the eastern continent, and of the various guilds on that side of God's domain, we've deemed that Zero Wing has the most potential. We only require 51% of Zero Wing's shares, and in exchange, the Qilin Corporation will provide capital, while Mythology will provide further training for Heaven's Rumble's members. We'll help your training center rise to fame, which will allow Zero Wing to recruit more talented members. And if I refuse? Shifeng asked. I'm afraid that isn't up to you, Hall Master Shir, Feng Shirhan said nonchalantly. I know that you've recently become a neutralizing Grandmaster, and have successfully blocked one of my father's full-powered blows, so I'm sure you're quite confident in your strength. I'm also sure that you're confident that no fighter in Fenglin City can defeat you. But your strength is nothing before mythology. As soon as Feng Shirhan said that, the gorilla youth behind her stepped forward, the intensity of his aura skyrocketing. His muscles bulged, tearing his shirt to reveal the dark copper skin underneath. The youth's aura became twice as strong, and the cold killing intent he radiated even made Lei Bao shudder. A Honglian Grandmaster. Lei Bao exclaimed. Training in the Honglian style was already exceptionally difficult, and very few people became Honglian masters. However, once someone mastered the style, they'd even be able to hold their ground against a neutralizing Grandmaster. Lei Bao had only heard of Honglian Grandmasters before. He could never have guessed that the young man before him, who hadn't even reached 30, would be a Honglian Grandmaster. No, his aura doesn't feel complete. He should still be half a step away from becoming a Grandmaster. Shifeng calmly stated after observing the gorilla youth for a moment. As expected of a neutralizing Grandmaster, you have keen senses, Feng Shirhan said, smiling. No, Matt isn't a Honglian Grandmaster. He's not quite mentally developed enough for that yet, but he'll have no issue taking on ordinary neutralizing Grandmasters. Do you still refuse to cooperate, Hall Master Shir? She had investigated Zero Wing thoroughly, with a focus on Stone Forest City. As a city in a level 100 neutral map, it was a treasure trove. Once she had learned about that fact, she had become resolved to obtain Zero Wing, no matter the cost. With Stone Forest City under her control, she could rise through mythology's ranks. When he heard Feng Shirhan's statement, Xiaoyu began to despair. He hadn't realized the Feng family was powerful enough to elicit the help of a half-step Honglian Grandmaster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Matt wasn't an actual Honglian Grandmaster, he'd have an overwhelming advantage over ordinary neutralizing Grandmasters in an official competition. If Shifeng lost to the older man, the Heaven's Rumble Training Center would be finished. He was the reason that the training center had grown to its current size and fame. If Shifeng were defeated, Heaven's Rumble would lose everything. Liang Jing watched the exchange with a grim expression as well. Zero Wing required the Heaven's Rumble Training Center to recruit talented members. Losing it would be a major hindrance to Zero Wing's development. I won't make this too difficult for you, kid. I'll accept defeat if you can last 3 hits. If you can't, then you'll hand over Zero Wing's shares, Matt declared before his fist shot toward Shifeng. Chapter 2395. Three Palms. Matt's sudden attack surprised everyone in the hall. Sure enough, he can't help himself. Feng Shirhan pitied Shifeng when she noticed Matt's attack. Matt was incredibly talented, and after working with the Hell training system, the last training system mythology had created, his already violent tendencies had become more prominent. Now he was a combat maniac. Even in mythology, there were few people who could spar with Matt. With a neutralizing Grandmaster before him, the man was naturally eager to spar with Shifeng. He had recently gotten closer to becoming a Fenglin Grandmaster, and hadn't had the chance to test his strength properly. Before Shifeng made his decision was the best opportunity for Matt to force the younger man into a fight. Although stopping Matt wasn't impossible, Feng Shihan thought it was necessary for Shifeng to experience mythology's power. Lei Bao, who stood by Shifeng's side, felt stifled when he saw Matt's punch. This strike was completely different than the hits Matt had used during their fight. Not only did this punch break the sound barrier, but it also seemed impossible to avoid. Lei Bao thought he could even hear the Grim Reaper call his name. However, just as Matt's hit was about to land, Shifeng casually took a half step back and rotated his right shoulder as if he had expected the attack. Almost as if an invisible barrier had manifested between them, Matt's punch harmlessly stopped a few centimeters away from Shifeng's shoulder. "What? Did I scare you?" Matt quipped when Shifeng hadn't made another move to stop him. "What happened to all of your confidence?" Matt was only a half-step Fenglin Grandmaster, and although he was more physically fit than ordinary neutralizing Grandmasters, his mental processing couldn't compare. His senses and reaction speed were just as inferior to that of a neutralizing Grandmaster. If a neutralizing Grandmaster focused on evading his attacks, Matt would be helpless against them. In fact, if Lei Bao, a peak internal force master, had focused on evasion, their fight would have lasted a lot longer. This was why Matt had deliberately challenged Shifeng to last 3 of his punches. Otherwise, fighting Shifeng would be a waste of time. "Forget it, Matt. Hall Master sure can't take your hits. I suggest you face each other in a race. At least that will give Hall Master sure a chance at victory." The tall, short-haired woman behind Feng Shihan ridiculed. The woman's provocation enraged Heaven's Rumble's disciples. Even veteran neutralizing Grandmasters couldn't help to match a half-step Fenglin Grandmaster's physical fitness, much less Shifeng, who had only recently become a neutralizing Grandmaster. Asking Shifeng to take a direct hit from Matt was a joke. Xiaoyu began to move forward to advise Shifeng against falling into the woman's trap. If he fell for it and lost against Matt, Heaven's Rumble's reputation would be in tatters. "I never said I wasn't interested. I just don't think those terms are fair," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "I have to sell Zero Wings shares if you win, yet you'll just pack up and leave if you lose. What benefit do I get for accepting this challenge?" "That's simple. Head instructor, sure, if you win, I'll give Zero Wing a 300 million loan, plus state-of-the-art training equipment for the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. I can guarantee that the equipment I have to offer rivals that in the country's top dojos and training centers," Feng Shihan declared, her lips curling into a wicked grin. She reacted as if she had been expecting Shifeng to ask, "State-of-the-art training equipment?" Xiaoyu's eyes glowed when he heard this. 300 million credits would be a massive boon to the Heaven's Rumble Training Center, but the state-of-the-art equipment would be far more important. The equipment Feng Shihan offered might not be worth 300 million credits, but it was impossible to purchase on the market. Only the supplier's partners had any access. In comparison, the best equipment available to the public was 2 generations behind, which was why ordinary training centers and dojos' disciples couldn't hold a candle to those from top dojos and training centers. If the Heaven's Rumble Training Center could get its hands on this equipment, its facilities would undergo a qualitative transformation. In turn, this would make the training center more attractive to far more people. Shifeng didn't respond immediately, however. "What? You're still not satisfied?" Feng Shihan chuckled at Shifeng's silence. "If that's not enough, state your demands, head instructor, sure." She already had a good grasp on Heaven's Rumble Training Center's situation. Although Lei Bao normally led the training center, and Heaven's Rumble's members received excellent training, it was nothing compared to the nation's top dojos and training centers, particularly when it came to its training facilities. If Heaven's Rumble acquired state-of-the-art equipment, its facilities would be an excellent promotional tool on their own, luring in far more members. Shifeng had no reason to reject her offer. Zero Wing desperately needed manpower, after all. Feng Shihan assumed that the only reason Shifeng hadn't jumped at her offer was that he wasn't confident in withstanding Matt's punches. Knowing this, she wouldn't give the younger man any excuses to refuse her challenge. Everyone in the hall thought the same. They had already witnessed Matt's power. Everyone would be impressed if Shifeng remained standing after taking a single hit, let alone 3. Since Miss Fong has asked, I only have one condition, Shifeng said, smiling. He must withstand 3 of my palm strikes as well. If you win, Zero Wing will sell its shares. If I win, I want 20 bottles of life potion. For a moment, shocked silence filled the training hall. Are you insane? The tall woman behind Feng Shihan blurted, staring at Shifeng. Hall Master. Even Lei Bao gave the younger man an incredulous look. Honglian-style practitioners were not famed for their strength, but for their frightening defense. It was why a Honglian master would dare to fight a neutralizing grandmaster, yet refuse to acknowledge Apex internal force masters. Matt was only a half step away from reaching grandmaster status in the Honglian style, and as such, his skin and bones were as solid as steel. Trying to injure him with human strength was an utter joke. Only bullets could break though his hide now. 20 life potions? Feng Shihan frowned. Life potions weren't like S-rank nutrient fluids. They contained an extraordinary amount of life force. Consuming 1 bottle of life potion would restore youth to an ordinary person. And the potions were in high demand among grandmaster martial artists. Even a major corporation like Qilin Corporation could only secure a small number of bottles. Despite being the Qilin Corporation's princess, Feng Shihan didn't even get that many life potions per year. If Miss Fong thinks this condition is too demanding, we can forget about this challenge, Shifeng mused, chuckling. Neither the credits nor the state-of-the-art equipment was a priority for Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble right now. The organizations would only truly be able to develop further by improving the strength of their current combatants. The life potion was undoubtedly one of the quickest ways for Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble to do so. As long as Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble became strong enough in the future, obtaining state-of-the-art was entirely possible if they were willing to spend a little money. But that wasn't the case for the life potions. They were truly rare items. Not even Lu Xinglua, the Starling Corporation's heir, could acquire many life potions, much less Shifeng. Fine. I agree to your condition. Feng Shihan hissed. Smiling, she continued. But remember, you only have 3 palm strikes. Of course. Shifeng nodded. You really think you can win, kid? Grinning, Matt said. Even if I stood here and let you hit me 20 times, you couldn't force me to take a single step back, much less 3. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, however, before Matt could say anything more, Shifeng walked up to him and thrust out his palm. The strike looked light and gentle from an outsider's perspective. It didn't look like it had the power to threaten anyone. That thrust didn't even look like it could injure an ordinary passerby, let alone Matt. However, just as Shifeng's palm was about to connect with his target, the movement changed, leaving 3 afterimages in its wake. Thud. A dull sound echoed throughout the hall, and Matt's face lost color until his complexion was a deathly pale. He stumbled 3 steps back, clutching his abdomen as he fell to his knees, unable to speak for a long moment. Chapter 2396. Initial display of strength. As Matt knelt, silence momentarily enveloped the entire training hall. The tall woman with short hair, in particular, wore a stiff expression, her mocking words forgotten. Impossible. Matt, what happened? Mythology's members were dumbfounded by their comrades' reaction. They were all quite familiar with Matt's strength and defense, but they also knew his personality. Thus, they knew this wasn't an act. Shifeng's palm strike had looked gentle. It hadn't even seemed powerful enough to injure an ordinary person, much less a Honglian expert like Matt. Yet after taking the hit, Matt had collapsed with his pale face twisted in pain. The strike had clearly left him with substantial injuries. Even Lei Bao and Heaven's Rumble's disciples gaped in shock, not to mention Feng Shihan's group. What did the Hall Master do? Heaven's Rumble disciples were confused. They had already witnessed Matt's strength earlier, when he had defeated Lei Bao in 3 moves. The man had such high defense that he had taken a full-powered blow from Lei Bao without issue, and yet, he couldn't cope with one of Shifeng's gentle palm strikes. Did that guy use some hidden weapon, Vice Guild leader? How else would he have hurt Matt? A male youth, who was as large as Feng Mingyu, quietly asked Feng Shihan. Aside from the old instructor, who wasn't in the hall, the strongest of Heaven's Rumble's visitors were Matt and Feng Shihan. Since Matt couldn't speak at that moment, only Feng Shihan could inform her companions of what Shifeng had done. The rest of Mythology's group nodded, agreeing with the male youth. They assumed that Shifeng must have cheated. No. He didn't just attack with one strike but 3 instantaneous palm strikes, Feng Shihan said, watching Shifeng with an indescribably grim expression. Moreover, all 3 strikes hit the same location, so it looked like a single attack. His physical control has already reached the spiritualization realm. 3 palm strikes. How is that possible? Their leader's answer stunned Mythology's members. Ignoring the difficulty of striking the same location multiple times, executing 3 simultaneous attacks was an unbelievable feat. They couldn't even fathom what kind of mental and physical reaction speed one would need to accomplish it. That's right, I executed 3 palm strikes as agreed, Shifeng said, not bothering to hide the truth. He was a little surprised to see Matt so pale, however. Not only does combining 3 attacks allow me to increase my raw power, but it also doubles my hits penetrating power. To think you only received minor injuries, I'm impressed with your muscular defense. If you had come here a few days ago, I really wouldn't have been a match for you. Adjusting to his epic mana body in the Howling Wind Canyon had inspired him. After he had become a neutralizing grandmaster in the real world, his mind had begun to secrete hormones to fortify his physical prowess. His mental and physical reaction speeds, in particular, had significantly improved, but superior reaction speed wasn't enough for him to exhibit his full strength. His physical control wasn't yet perfect. However, by controlling the flow of mana in his epic mana body, he had come up with some combat techniques that would rely on his reaction speed. Although he couldn't replicate these techniques perfectly in the real world, he was able to exhibit a fraction of the technique's power. Even that fraction greatly increased his strength and penetrating power, allowing him to drive the force of his strikes toward Matt's organs. Not even an adult bear would escape such an attack unscathed. Although Matt was in incredible shape, he was only human. Once his pain had subsided to a bearable level, Matt stood, glaring at Shifeng with a hint of fear in his gaze. He abandoned any thought of fighting the younger man. You very good. I've lost this challenge. Honglian-style practitioners were famed for their brute strength and defense. The only reason that they dared to clash with neutralizing grandmasters was their ability to take a hit without sustaining significant injuries. On the other hand, if they got lucky and landed a bow, they could knock out their opponent with a single hit. However, they'd have to flee from a neutralizing grandmaster like Shifeng, who could ignore their defense. Fighting such an individual would only spell their death. Still, the situation confused Matt. Aside from Shifeng, he had only ever taken such a serious blow from his old instructor. His instructor was an old monster who had become a neutralizing grandmaster several decades ago. The old instructor had also received help from plenty of state-of-the-art and medication to grow stronger. His strength had long since reached inhuman levels. In comparison, Shifeng was only in his early 20s. Just how did this young man become so powerful? In that case, will you fulfill your end of the bargain, Ms. Feng? Shifeng asked after Matt had admitted defeat. After his fight with Matt, Shifeng's mind spun. It wasn't because he had successfully executed a God's domain combat technique in the real world, but because of how impressed he was with Mythology's expert standards. He had never thought Mythology would be this powerful. If even Mythology could nurture such incredible fighters, other superpowers shouldn't be far behind. More than anything, Shifeng needed a large stock of life potions to nurture his own fitness, as well as help Lei Bao and Fire Dance become neutralizing grandmasters. Otherwise, Zero Wings operations in the real world would be in grave danger. The 3 palms, 1 strike technique might have looked simple, but it was extremely hard to execute. If Shifeng hadn't mentally prepared himself, and Matt hadn't simply stood there to take the hit, he wouldn't have been able to execute the technique. I don't have 20 life potions on me right now, but I'll have someone deliver them to you before the end of tomorrow, Feng Shihan said, frowning. Shifeng's strength had drastically exceeded her expectations. He certainly couldn't be considered an ordinary neutralizing grandmaster. We have other matters to tend to, so we will take our leave for now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After saying so, Feng Shihan left with her subordinates, and Shifeng didn't try to stop her. Feng Shihan was the Qilin Corporation's princess. She couldn't afford to break a promise she made in public. After Feng Shihan's group left, cheers broke out in the training hall as the disciples celebrated. Everyone practically worshipped Shifeng's display, which had renewed their confidence in the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. Some of the normal members even considered applying to become true Heaven's Rumble disciples. However, the atmosphere in the luxury maglev car parked outside of the training center wasn't as cheerful. We're just going to leave, Vice Guild Leader? I know we only came here to test Heaven's Rumble's standards, but wasn't our main goal to compete with the training center virtually and steal its virtual combat platforms in Fenglin City? Sure, Feng might be strong, but it'll be a different story when we fight in a virtual combat platform. Not even Zero Wing's Black Flame will be a match for you with your strength as a Tier 3 player, much less Shifeng, Matt complained. No. We need to report this to the old instructor, Feng Shihan said, shaking her head. No matter how you look at it, it's strange for someone as young as Shifeng to be so powerful. I'm sure there's some big secret to his strength. If we can discover this secret, we'll gain far more authority in mythology. It might even be enough for me to become one of the headquarters' 3 great Vice Guild leaders. Chapter 2397. Ascension Realm. Fenglin City, Redstone Restaurant. Feng Shihan and her entourage stood before a man in one of the Redstone restaurant's VIP rooms, which had an antique flair. The man sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. Despite the fact that half of the man's hair had already turned white, his facial features were that of a man in his early 40s. In truth, however, he was already over 70. Although this elderly man wasn't as large or robust as Matt and the others, his aura felt like that of an unshakable mountain. Standing in his presence, one couldn't help but revere the old man. This man was none other than Situ Tian, Feng Shihan and her companion's instructor. Matt, is Shifeng truly as powerful as Shihan described? Was he really able to combine the power of his attacks? Situ Tian asked as he opened his eyes and looked at the younger man before him. I'm sure of it. The moment after the first hit, his strike's penetrating power doubled. If I hadn't reacted quickly enough and diverted some of the force, he would have likely knocked me out, Matt said, nodding. Before today, he had only ever experienced that level of power from Situ Tian, and the memory of Shifeng's hits were still fresh in his mind. Instructor, I investigated Shifeng thoroughly, and there were no reports of him possessing this kind of strength. He's only recently reached the Grandmaster realm and partially enhanced his mental capacity. He must have found something in God's domain that has allowed him to execute such a technique in the real world, Feng Shihan surmised. It seems Zero Wing isn't so simple after all. I must have many secrets, Situ Tian said. I suspect this Shifeng has made considerable progress in the realms of truth. He's likely reached the Ascension realm at the very least. The Ascension realm? How is that possible? Matt exclaimed. Mythology had discovered the realms of truth combat system, which had profound principles, in God's domain. At first, some of the various superpowers had labeled the realms of truth as the spiritualization realm, and they had discovered that learning these principles allowed one to gain unbelievable control with combat techniques. Learning these principles was akin to engraving combat techniques on one's bones. Players that learned these principles and practiced them successfully could execute a combat technique with every movement. They could exhibit strength far beyond their natural potential. However, progressing through the realms of truth was an intense challenge. Even Matt, a genius, had barely begun, yet he was considered one of the most accomplished individuals in mythology. And now, they discovered that Shifeng, who was much younger than Matt, had gone beyond, reaching the Ascension realm. How could he allow himself to believe it? That is why I am sure Zero Wing has hidden many secrets. Mythology has expended a lot of manpower and resources to explore the realms of truth, Yet we have barely uncovered some of the training methods, Sita said, his interest in Zero Wing growing. Zero Wing must have obtained some clues relating to the realms of truth and uncovered detailed training methods. No individual could reach such a standard by themselves otherwise. If that is true, we must obtain this secret, Feng Shirhan declared, passion burning in her gaze. Mythology had constantly been searching for the realms of truth secrets, but the clues they had uncovered were few and vague. Needless to say, they had yet to discover any systematic training methods. If she could get her hands on Zero Wing's training system and combine it and mythology's research, not only could she improve her own combat standards, but she could also gain more authority within the guild. Vice Guild Leader, Zero Wing's roots on the eastern continent are too solid to shake right now, especially now that it has Stone Forest City. I'm afraid that we won't be able to cause any significant damage. Even if we target the Heaven's Rumble Training Center, our results will likely be negligible. At worst, we'll slow Zero Wing's recruitment rate, but we won't be able to harm the guild's foundations directly, Matt anxiously said. He desperately wanted a Realms of Truth training system, as well. If he could progress further through the Realms of Truth, not only would he grow stronger in God's domain, but he'd also gain more combat power in the real world. Don't worry about it. Since we now know Zero Wing has obtained clues regarding the Realms of Truth, our guild will not let it out of our sight. I've read through the reports on Zero Wing. It seems the guild is at war with Starlink, and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain is part of the reason it has held on for so long, Sita Qingtian calmly stated. If we can interfere and prevent Phoenix Rain from helping Zero Wing, I doubt the guild will last long against Starlink. Shirhan, visit the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and inform Ku Rong of our stance. I'm sure that old fellow will make the wise decision. I understand. I'll get it done once I return, Feng Shirhan said, nodding. She had thought of pressuring the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, too, but she was only a vice guild leader from one of mythology's many branch guilds. Although she had a good reputation in the guild, she had no authority to represent the guild in crucial matters. Now that she had permission, however, she didn't have to worry about any negative repercussions. Whether or not the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would give in to her demands wasn't even a question. Mythology was one of the 5 great super guilds in God's domain. Even ordinary super guilds had to show it respect, not to mention a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Meanwhile, in Zero Wing's main headquarters, once Shifeng received the 20 bottles of life potion from Feng Shirhan's subordinate, he gave 3 bottles to Lei Bao. He instructed the man to visit the extraordinary tower with the berserker Lei Bao had made for fun in God's domain. After his fight with Matt, Shifeng had an odd sense of impending danger. Although Zero Wing was developing smoothly in God's domain, it was far too weak in the real world, especially when it came to poaching talented fighters. The various superpowers had already begun to do so on a large scale. However, since Shifeng was so busy with his affairs in God's domain, he didn't have time to pay attention to Heaven's Rumble's development. If he wanted his training center to grow, he'd need another Grandmaster martial artist to defend it long-term. Among those working in Heaven's Rumble, Lei Bao was undoubtedly the closest to reaching the Grandmaster realm. After him, there were Fire Dance and the others. Lei Bao's physical fitness and control had already peaked, and he was only a step away from breaking into the Grandmaster realm. To make that final step, his mental capacity needed to undergo a qualitative transformation. Although training in the Extraordinary Tower wasn't nearly as effective as training in the Tower of 4 Gods, Lei Bao had a high chance of making that final step with the help of the life potions. Once he became a Grandmaster, Heaven's Rumble would grow at a frightening pace. The training center would also have a much better chance of resisting the various major corporations' harassment. After finishing with Lei Bao, Shifeng split another 10 life potions among Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, Cola, Shadow Sword and Turtle Dove, the guild's experts that had already grasped internal force. The life potions should help them develop their physical fitness and mental capacity. Shifeng then drank one of the life potions before returning to his virtual gaming cabin and logging back into God's domain. He intended to open the portal to the Western continent as soon as possible. Only then could Zero Wing stabilize its foothold in God's domain and secure enough resources and strength to develop the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. By the time Sherfeng re-entered God's domain, Kola and the others were, for the most part, rested and ready. The team resumed grinding in the Demonwolf mountain ranges outer region for a while, collecting the last mana strands for their quest. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This quest is a tough one. If not for the fine gold guards, we wouldn't have had any hope of completing it. I wonder what kind of rewards we'll get once we turn it in. Blackie pondered, filled with anticipation as he watched Sherfeng collect the final mana strand. It'd be awesome if we earned a fragmented legendary item. This was the first time they had completed an inferior legendary quest, and they had obtained this quest in a level 100+ neutral map. The quest rewards would definitely be extraordinary. Alright, tidy up. Once everyone's ready, we're leaving, Sherfeng said, chuckling at Blackie's excitement. He did not particularly care about the reward items. He knew that not even an inferior legendary quest had a high chance of granting a fragmented legendary item. Rather, he looked forward to the favorability they'd earn with the famed smith, Alba Grey. In no time, Sherfeng and his team stood before Alba Grey once more. Chapter 2398, Disintegration Power, Activate. By the time Sherfeng's group returned to Alba Grey, the NPC's divine might had weakened considerably. Even with the protection of the gods, the hero was in danger of dying. Seeing this, Sherfeng had to admit that the Jealous Witch was incredibly powerful. With a single curse, she could cause a hero's downfall. With this kind of power and the witch's erratic mood, it was no wonder why she was considered a natural disaster. When she was in a good mood, she could help a kingdom prosper, but when her mood was sour, she could cause a kingdom's demise. Kingdoms and empires both revered and feared the woman. Lord Alba Grey, we've collected 1,000 strands of the Jealous Witch's mana. How should we proceed to lift your curse? Sherfeng asked the frozen hero. Simple. You just need to release the mana you've collected around me. Alba Grey telepathically communicated with a threat of excitement. However, while I am removing the seal, the Jealous Witch's frost elf will sense this. I must ask you to stop her until I am free. Just as Sherfeng was about to ask for more information, the snow around them stirred. It then gathered into the form of a woman. The woman was nearly 2 meters tall and looked mostly human, but unlike humans, her body was made entirely of snow. Divine runes etched themselves in her frozen form, giving her a sacred aura. One couldn't help the urge to submit to her will as they stood in her presence. As if the ambient mana had discovered its master, it gathered around the woman. A higher magic elf? Everyone gasped when they saw the snow woman's statistics. Ice elf Ulinium, high magic elf mythic, level 110 HP 3, 500, 000/3, 500, 000 magic elves had considerably high life ratings in God's domain, much higher than elemental creatures. Many of the spells humans wielded in this day and age had originated from magic elves. Mana favored these beings even more than ordinary elves because they possessed bodies made of mana itself. Meanwhile, high magic elves stood above magic elves in God's domain's hierarchy, akin to kings among magic elves. Their life ratings could even rival that of dragons. Do you really think you can escape my master's curse? Ulinium mocked as she gave Alba Grey a disdainful look. She then swept her glance over Sherfeng and his companions, saying, Adventurers, it'd be best if you do not poke your noses into matters that do not concern you. Leave now, and I will spare you. Stay and help Alba Grey, and I'll ensure you remain here, alongside the rest of these foolish knights. As Ulinium spoke, the team felt an overwhelming sense of dread. They struggled to move as if the air around them froze them in place. Even breathing became a laborious task. Is she really a mythic monster? Kola muttered, shocked as he stared at Ulinium. With just a few words, High Magic Elf had immobilized Tier 3 players. She was nothing like the mythic monsters they had faced before. Guild leader, she is far too dangerous for us. If we try to fight her, only the personal guards will last more than 10 seconds. Yan Tianqing expended an immense amount of energy to whisper to Shifeng. I doubt we'll even last 5 seconds against her, Shifeng said, smiling bitterly at Yulinium. He had never expected this inferior legendary quest to be so vicious. Collecting 1,000 mana strands within 10 days in the Demonwolf mountain range had already been a nigh impossible task, but the challenge before them was simply a joke. They might have had a chance if the system had pitted them against an ordinary magic elf, but trying to fight a high magic elf was on par with challenging a bona fide dragon. Although they had raided a Tier 4 ice dragon, Heathwaite had been severely injured before they had arrived. Its combat power had been nowhere near its peak. Furthermore, Shifeng had been able to suppress it with his heavenly dragon's breath, which was the only reason they had had a slim chance of defeating it. Yulinium, on the other hand, was a completely different story. Not only was Yulinium's combat power at its peak, but as a high magic elf, she had hundreds of spells under her command. She could wipe a 100-man Tier 3 team off the face of God's domain in a matter of seconds. If players tried to fight her without specific tools to counter her attacks, their only hope of survival was to flee as far and fast as possible. Unfortunately, summoning a Tier 4 Great Demon with the Bible of Darkness was impossible, as well. Yulinium had high enough intellect that she'd target Shifeng immediately, and the Great Demon wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Adventurers, give me 90 seconds. If you can hold out for that long, I can free myself from this curse. Alba Grey suddenly shouted. Alba Grey's words left everyone speechless. They could barely move within Yulinium's domain. They'd be lucky to stall her for 10 seconds, not to mention 90. Yulinium was no normal mythic monster. She was a creature that was more skilled with her spells than Tier 4 great wizards, and she loved large-scale combat. She could annihilate them all with one AoE spell, leaving no opportunities to challenge her. 90 seconds? After some pondering, Shifeng turned to Kola and asked, Kola, can you hold her for 10 seconds? If I activate my Berserk and life-saving skills, it should be doable, Kola said after considering his prowess. He currently wore the Frostwolf set, and with his fragmented legendary shield, he was more than capable of tanking a level 100+ mythic monster. Yulinium's life rating rivaled that of dragons, but he shouldn't have any issues tanking her for 10 seconds if he activated his Berserk and life-saving skills. Do you have a plan, guild leader? Yan Tianqing asked. They could simply surrender, but they'd have to bear the brunt of the quest's penalty. I do, but I'm not sure if it will succeed, Shifeng replied. Unfortunately, we have no other options. Kola, get ready. If Alba Grey had asked them to stall Yulinium for several minutes, Shifeng would have had no choice but to surrender, but he had a chance if he only had to hold her off for 90 seconds. Shifeng then retrieved the Bible of Darkness and summoned a great demon. Seeing this confused his companions. They knew that Yulinium was intelligent enough to ignore the great demon and attack its summoner. How could a great demon possibly slow the high magic elf down? Although they weren't sure what Shifeng intended, they followed his instructions and split up, putting as much distance between them and Shifeng as possible. Meanwhile, Kola activated his Berserk skill and waited for Shifeng's signal. Go! Shifeng yelled once everyone was in position. He immediately released the mana they had collected around Alba Grey as Kola dashed toward the enraged ice elf, activating Justice Roar to attract her attention. Foolish humans! You will die here with the rest of these fools. Yulinium bellowed. Watching Kola, she lightly waved hand. Ice lances, over a dozen meters long, coalesced in the air and flew toward the MT. Without chanting an incantation or drawing any runes, Yulinium had cast the Tier 4, Ice-type spell, Frost Tooth. As the ice lances flew toward him, Kola relied on his combat standards and reaction speed to dodge, but he failed to evade one of the lances. He was forced to block the attack with his shield. Boom! The ice lance exploded against his shield, and the impact forced Kola to sink into the snowy ground. The attack had dealt over -300,000 damage, taking more than 10% of Kola's total HP. How powerful is she? Everyone's eyes nearly fell from their sockets. Kola had activated his Berserk skill and life-saving skills, so he should have substantial damage reduction. Yet he had still lost over 10% of his HP from one of Yulinium's attacks. Had he tried to charge at the Ice Elf without these skills active, she would have one-shot him. Seeing that the first attack had failed to end her target, Yulinium raised her hand again and began to chant an incantation. Responding to her command, a powerful blizzard swept toward Kola, streams of wind striking like pythons and threatening to tear Kola apart. As these wind serpents attacked, Kola was forced to halt his advance and defend himself with his shield. His HP rapidly plummeted. At this rate, he didn't have enough HP to last 5 seconds, much less 10. Fortunately, every healer on the team focused on recovering Kola's HP, keeping him alive albeit barely. As the seconds passed, Kola's HP climbed and fell like a roller coaster as he danced on the fringes of death. The team's healers couldn't mitigate Yulinium's damage fully, and each round of healing seemed less effective as Kola steadily lost HP. I can't hold on for much longer, guild leader. Kola knew he had bit off more than he could chew as he glanced at his HP bar. As Kola finished his last word, another blizzard assaulted him from behind. Unfortunately, the wind pythons attacking from the front had him preoccupied, and he could only watch as more approached from behind. It's over. Sensing the incoming attack, Kola knew his time was up. However, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was none other than Shifeng. 10 seconds have passed. Leave the rest to me. Shifeng shouted over the roaring wind as he charged at the incoming wind python behind Kola. Guild leader. The team was confused as they watched Shifeng try to meet the incoming blizzard in battle. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Kola was a guardian knight, yet the blizzard's pythons had devoured a significant portion of his HP. As a swordsman, Shifeng would only dig his own grave by trying to block the python's attack. Disintegration power, activate. Just as the blizzard was about to reach him, Shifeng activated the disintegration armor's strongest skill, disintegration power. The intensity of Shifeng's aura immediately skyrocketed, and gray smoke drifted from his body, shattering space around him. As the blizzard's python reached him, Shifeng swung Killing Ray to counter its attack. Chapter 2399. Power of Tier 4. As he swung Killing Ray, the python of ice and wind stretched open its maw and threatened to devour Shifeng. When the sacred sword and the blizzard clashed, the result stupefied everyone watching. With a passing flash of light, the blade sliced apart the powerful, icy attack, dispersing the blizzard. He blocked it. What did the guild leader do? Kola, who desperately fought to hold his ground against the powerful blizzard attacking him, and Yan Tianxing and the rest, who watched from a distance, wondered if they were hallucinating. Yan Tianxing and the others could tell how powerful the wind pythons were based on Kola's struggle against Yulinium's attacks. If they tried to block one of the wind python's strikes, it'd be a miracle if they didn't die instantly, even with an active berserk skill. Kola had already activated his life-saving skill, which drastically reduced incoming damage. Without that, Yulinium's wind pythons would have long since ended his life. And yet, Shifeng had countered one of the wind pythons with a single strike. The outcome even surprised Shifeng. He hadn't expected his strike to be so powerful after using disintegration power to upgrade himself to a Tier 4 Sword Emperor. So, this is the true strength of a Sword Emperor. Shifeng thought as he relished the strength he had wielded with his counterattack. Shifeng had never been able to break past Tier 3 into Tier 4 during his previous life, so he had never felt the power a Tier 4 player commanded. He only knew that they were incredibly strong. But after taking a moment to adapt to his Tier 4 epic mana body, he more or less understood why so few Tier 3 players could stand against those at Tier 4, even when wielding a fragmented legendary weapon. The differences between Tier 3 and Tier 4 players weren't limited to basic attributes and physique. There was also a qualitative difference in the way their bodies conducted mana. With his improved mana body, Shifeng's mind was clearer than ever before, and his body constantly felt at the ready. This was evident through his counterattack. He had used the bronze combat technique, Lightning Flash, executing 17 attacks in a single strike. As he did, the 17 attacks had even devoured the space before them, which was a feat he definitely wasn't capable of without disintegration power active. With how clear his mind was, he knew that Tier 3 players had no hope against Tier 4 players, even if they managed to bridge the gap between their basic attributes and physiques. A Tier 4 mental state was on an entirely different level. During the brief moment Shifeng analyzed his Tier 4 state, Yulunium became enraged, having seen this swordsman shatter her attack, and the ambient mana began to rampage around her. The Ice Elf began to chant another incantation while she drew divine runes in the air with flying speed, stupefying Iluafe and the other magical class team members. Based on the number of runes Yulunium drew, she was clearly trying to cast a large-scale destruction spell, but normally, players needed a long time to complete such a spell. The High Magic Elf, on the other hand, drew several dozen lines of divine runes in 2 seconds. It was simply unbelievable. Before the watching team members could snap out of their dazes, a magic array covering a 200-yard radius appeared above the snowy battlefield. As it did, it sucked dry all ice-type mana in the area, concentrating it within the array's core. Insignificant humans, you will pay for your foolishness. Yulunium snarled after finishing her chant. She then raised a fine-boned finger and pointed it at Shifeng. Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell, Frost Shower. Several hundred icy meteors pulled themselves free from the magic array and descended on the frozen lake, each one containing enough power to shatter space itself. We're doomed. Watching the incoming meteors, the team began to despair. This attack could even wipe out a team of several hundred Tier 3 players in an instant. She's finally getting serious? Shifeng, on the other hand, wasn't surprised to see the incoming balls of ice. Calmly, he activated the 7 Luminaries' Ring's absolute domain. High magic elves could even rival God's domain's dragons. And how powerful, exactly, was a dragon? A dragon was the personification of a natural disaster. Not even a full kingdom could stop a dragon's wrath, and it would be forced to watch as the creature devastated its territories. High magic elves might have a slightly lower life rating than dragons, but they had the combat power to rival the monstrosities due to their exceptional talent with wielding magic. High magic elves could effortlessly cast frighteningly powerful spells, which usually required a long casting time. An ordinary Tier 4 Great Wizard, for example, would need a dozen seconds to cast a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell, but Yulunium only needed 2 seconds. As the hail of meteors bombarded the frozen lake, they transformed a 200-yard radius area into an icy hell. Fortunately, not even Tier 4 spells could break through Shifeng's absolute domain, and Shifeng and his companions within range of his skill emerged unharmed. The moment Yulunium's attack ended, Shifeng charged at the Ice Elf. Yulunium was a magical class being. If she were allowed to cast her spells freely, she could even slay Tier 5 players, much less Shifeng's Tier 3 teammates. If Shifeng wanted to prevent her from slaughtering them all, he had to face her in melee combat. With absolute domain's protection, Shifeng could approach Yulunium while she bombarded him with a steady stream of Tier 4 spells. But as he approached, he had to admit that this Ice Elf was incredibly powerful. Not only were her basic attributes considerably higher than his, but she also had an endless supply of Tier 4 spells at her command. Even after forcibly promoting himself to Tier 4, Shifeng was at a major disadvantage. With absolute domain's duration running out, Zero Wings members, who watched from a distance, began to grow nervous. Yulunium would have torn Shifeng to shreds by now if not for absolute domain's protection. Her attacks against their guild leader weren't like the Ice Elf's assault against Kola. She had even begun to double speed cast. Combined with her already absurd casting speed, not even Shifeng could dodge all of her attacks in time. He was forced to rely on Sword's orbit to block some of the attacks, lest the impact knock him back. As though she had anticipated the moment, Yulunium sneered and summoned a crystalline staff. The instant absolute domain came to an end. With a swing of her staff, she revealed numerous magic arrays that had been hidden under the snow around her. Countless icicles shot from the arrays, flying toward Shifeng, and a powerful blizzard of hail and snow descended on the swordsman. Are you kidding me? Is Yulunium really just a monster? Blackie's eyes nearly fell from their sockets when he saw the magic arrays appear around Shifeng. Not only had the Ice Elf set traps during the battle, But her traps had been so cleverly placed that not even Blackie, a cursemancer, had noticed them. This was the first time he had ever experienced such a thing in God's domain. Moreover, Ulinium had concealed over a dozen magic arrays under the snow. As they activated simultaneously, they had the power of more than a dozen Tier 4 magical classes attacking as one. An attack like this would even turn a Tier 4 metric tons into Swiss cheese. As expected of a high magic elf, she's even calculated my skill's duration. The incoming icicles didn't surprise Shifeng in the least. He immediately commanded his summoned Great Demon, which had been on standby, to join the fray. Mythic monsters' intellect shouldn't be underestimated after level 100, especially that of a high magic elf like Ulinium. Shifeng had expected her to employ traps. If these creatures were any weaker, the various superpowers of his previous life wouldn't have struggled so hard against superior mythics. The Great Demon appeared behind Shifeng instantly, and blocked the icicles coming in from behind its master. With the Great Demon's help, Shifeng could concentrate on the wind pythons attacking him head-on. However, despite focusing on defense, the wind pythons were too powerful for him, and his HP continued to fall with each attack he blocked. If he hadn't had the help of his healer's diligent spellcasting, he wouldn't have lasted more than 15 seconds against this bombardment. With the Great Demon guarding his back and the rear line healer's support, Shifeng had a much easier time distracting Ulinium. Before even Shifeng had realized it, another 50 or so seconds had passed, and only 5 seconds remained before Disintegration power's duration would end. All of your efforts are futile, human. Your power is already fading, and once it does, both you and Alba Grey will forever decorate this lake as ice sculptures. Ulinium declared, flashing Shifeng a sinister grin when she sensed Disintegration power begin to fade. Is that so? Shifeng shot back, unfazed despite Disintegration power's duration running out. On the contrary, he revealed a bright smile as he said, I disagree. With that comment, Ulinium realized that something was amiss. She immediately shifted her gaze toward the distant Anna, but it was too late as the personal guard completed the final verse of her incantation. A holy light pierced the clouds and shot toward the frozen lake as a higher Valkyrie, with 3 sets of pure white wings, appeared not far from the ice elf. A higher Valkyrie? Ulinium's expression shifted when she saw her newest opponent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The Valkyrie gave Ulinium no time to prepare as she threw her thunder spear at the high magic elf, its astonishing power exploding through the space around it. A higher Valkyrie's life rating couldn't compare to that of a dragon, but it was on par with a high magic elfess. Ulinium was forced to focus on the higher Valkyrie's attack, defending herself. The higher Valkyrie demanded all of Ulinium's attention, and the ice elf had no energy to spare on Shifeng. She couldn't even defend herself from his Great Demon's attacks, which steadily chipped away at her HP. As the seconds passed, the curse on Alba Grey grew weaker, yet Ulinium couldn't do anything about it. 90 seconds after Shifeng had released the Jealous Witch's mana around the NPC, everyone heard ice shatter as Alba Grey broke free of his icy prison. Chapter 2400. Sword Saint. Seeing Alba Grey break free from his curse, Shifeng breathed a deep sigh of relief. Although the higher Valkyrie could keep Ulinium busy, it couldn't exist for long. If the higher Valkyrie had disappeared before Alba Grey had freed himself, Shifeng wouldn't have been able to stop the ice elf even with twofold berserk. Not only was there a full tier difference between them, but Ulinium was also powerful enough to rival a dragon. Shifeng wouldn't have been able to resist her attacks for long. Damn it! Ulinium grew incensed when she noticed Alba Grey was free. She swung her icy staff at Shifeng, bellowing, I'll send you all to hell. The high magic elf began to chant an incantation, and a 3-fold magic array covering a 500-yard radius began to form in the sky. The instant the array took shape, it tore apart space around it. 2 seconds later, these spatial tiers transformed into a gigantic black hole. So this is her true strength. Shifeng looked up at the black hole with a grim expression. Tier 5 spell, Void Storm. Tier 5 spells were beyond extraordinary. They had enough power to destroy an entire city, transforming it into a lifeless land. This was why the various kingdoms and empires feared Tier 5 beings. Even emperors had to show respect before them. Shifeng had never dreamed that Ulinium could cast Tier 5 spells. Despite being a Tier 4 creature, there was only a difference of 1 tier between Tier 4 and 5, but the difference between a Tier 4 spell and a Tier 5 spell was like the difference between heaven and earth. Any random Tier 5 offensive spell could severely injure a Tier 4 creature. If a Tier 4 player tried to stand against a Tier 5 spell, their death would almost be a guarantee. Even Tier 4 MTs could withstand such power. Players wouldn't even have a chance to flee since the amount of mana a Tier 5 spell commanded would freeze space around them. When Zero Wings members saw the void storm forming above them, they turned a deathly pale. The resulting shockwave would easily cover several thousand yards. They had no hope of escaping this spell's range. Before any of them could start running for their lives, however, a pitch-black storm emerged from the black hole, covering the world in an endless darkness. Not even Shifeng knew how to get out of this one. Absolute Domain might be able to protect them, but the skill was still on cooldown. They couldn't escape via instantaneous transfer scrolls, either, since space around them had frozen. Fortunately, they had completed their quest. Even if they died, they'd only lose some EXP, which they could quickly recover. Seeing the descending storm of darkness, Shifeng prepared to die. Suddenly, Alba Grey unsheathed the golden sword hanging from his waist and slashed it toward the endless darkness. A brilliant light spread through the darkness, purifying it. In just 3 seconds, Alba Grey's holy light had vanquished Ulinium's void storm. Crap. Isn't that hero a little too powerful? Yan Tianxing and the others gaped in shock, unable to process what had just happened. In one move, Ulinium had transformed the day into night, whereas Alba Grey had returned daylight to the frozen lake with a move of his own. Their combat power was simply unbelievable. Staring at Alba Grey, Zero Wings members finally understood what it meant to be a hero. A hero could not be overwhelmed by numbers. All of the monsters they had fought were insignificant before Alba Grey. The NPC could likely even slaughter a full group of Tier 4 players instantly. Damn it. You've actually become a sword saint. Ulinium stared at Alba Grey in astonishment as her void storm dissipated. That's right. Removing the curse has allowed me to grasp some of the principles I needed to make a breakthrough. You are no longer a match for me. Alba Grey roared, a hint of excitement lacing his tone. Although the jealous witch's curse had caused him endless suffering, studying it had allowed him to understand the concepts he needed to become a true Tier 5 sword saint. A Tier 5 sword saint. Shifeng was similarly shocked, and he spun to look at Alba Grey. Alba Grey, Sacred Magic Knight. Hero Sword Saint level? HP? / NPCs face greater struggles when trying to complete their promotions, but this was also why NPC status rose dramatically with every promotion in God's domain. A Tier 3 NPC, for example, could serve as a minor city's magistrate, while a Tier 4 NPC could serve as a magistrate in a major city. Even emperors had to show respect before Tier 5 NPCs. But as far as Shifeng could remember, Alba Grey had only been a Tier 4 hero during his previous life. This hadn't changed even after 10 years since God's Domain's launch. Alba Grey had never managed to become a Tier 5 sword saint. Even so, as a hero, Alba Grey had been able to contend with ordinary Tier 5 NPCs. Including his identity as a famed smith, even the various empires had taken him seriously. And yet, Alba Grey was now a Tier 5 sword saint. It is true. Now that you are a sword saint, I am no match for you, but don't you dare think this is over. Ulinium declared as she glared at Alba Grey. She then turned to Shifeng and continued, You as well, adventurer. After her bold declaration, the ice elf began to disintegrate into snowflakes. Don't think you can get away from me that easily. Alba Grey shouted. He unsheathed the second sword hanging from his waist and charged at Ulinium, swinging the pitch-black blade. He had only executed a normal slash, but from a distance, the attack had looked like a black wall, rising into the air and extending more than 500 meters. The pitch-black wall bisected the high magic elf, and Ulinium released a harrowing scream as a snow-white energy crystal fell from her body. Although the attack had significantly weakened Yulunium's life aura, she successfully read latest chapters at Wuxia World. As the black wall faded from existence, only Alba Gray remained on the snow-covered lake. It seems she still managed to escape. Alba Gray frowned as he glared at the spatial tear before him. Shifeng, who stood nearby, wasn't surprised in the least that the ice elf had gotten away. A mythic-ranked high magic elf was on par with a mythic-ranked world boss of the same level. In fact, she should be even stronger. She could cast Tier 5 spells after all, which proved that she was only half a step away from becoming a Tier 5 being herself. Even a Tier 5 hero would face a long battle to kill her. With Yulunium's disappearance, Shifeng heard the sound of a system notification. System, congratulations. You have completed the inferior legendary quest, last night. Quest completion rate, 93%. Quest rating, S rank. Chapter 2401. Alba Gray's reward and S rank rating? Shifeng was astonished when he saw the outcome of his quest. He'd thought that he had barely passed with a C rank rating. His team had spent 9 days collecting the 1,000 mana strands. He had never dreamed that he would earn an S rank rating after taking so long. Receiving an S rank rating for high-ranked quests with completion rate indicators was incredibly difficult in God's domain. The quests themselves were typically challenging, and players had to complete the quest to near perfection to achieve such a high result. However, if players could earn an S rank rating, the original rewards would be improved slightly. Although the bonus wouldn't be very high, the additional rewards for an epic ranked or higher quest would be extremely valuable. A player had a 20% chance of earning an epic item as their reward for completing an epic quest, but if they gain the bonus from an S rank rating, their chances of earning an epic item would increase to 30% or even 40%. When completing an inferior legendary quest, an S rank rating could lead to a fragmented legendary item as a reward, which was normally impossible. Although Zero Wing had plenty of fragmented legendary items, every fragmented legendary item could enable a player to become a peak or apex expert in the future. Thus, every fragmented legendary item was a welcome addition. After the system had notified Shifeng of his results, Alba Gray approached him. Fellow adventurers, thank you for saving me from that curse. I owe you all a big favor. Although my night division is no more, I will do my best to assist you with one matter. Alba Gray gratefully offered, showing none of the arrogance Tier 5 powerhouses usually possessed. System, you have obtained Alba Gray's trust. Alba Gray's favorability of you has increased by 80 points. You have obtained Alba Gray's communication crystal. Alba Gray's statement and the system notification excited every member of the team. They had already witnessed the hero's power, and now, they could reach out to Alba Gray and ask him for a favor. None of them had expected to receive this kind of reward. Guild leader, with Alba Gray's help, we can destroy one of Starlink's cities. I can't wait to see their faces. Cola said, his eyes glowing as he gazed at Alba Gray. That's right. Let's destroy Starlink's new city. I want to see how they intend to duke it out with us after that. Blackie exclaimed, nodding. Starlink had persistently caused trouble for Zero Wing, especially with its newest city. That city had claimed a ton of Zero Wing's potential profit. If they destroyed it, not only would Stone Forest City regain its unique status as the only city in a level 100 neutral map, but they could also deal a heavy blow to their enemy, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. No, we no longer need to resort to such a tactic, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Starlink had constructed a city near a level 100 neutral map, but even if Alba Gray destroyed it, there was no guarantee that Starlink couldn't construct a new city. Moreover, other superpowers would soon have cities of their own in level 100 neutral maps. The various superpowers experts had already reached level 100 and begun to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests. Constructing a new city near a level 100 neutral map wouldn't be difficult before long. Moreover, Alba Gray's favor was incomparably valuable, especially now that he had become a sword saint. Even emperors would struggle to earn a favor from this hero. Asking Alba Gray to attack a mere guild city was like killing a mosquito with a bazooka. Shifeng then walked up to the freed hero. Lord Hero, I am a forger and have always been passionate about my craft. I am particularly interested in mana forging, and I have heard that your research on the subject is unparalleled on the continent. I'd like to study your notes if you'll allow it, Shifeng stated his request after taking a deep breath. A Tier 5 Sword Saint could even destroy a kingdom with ease, much less a city, but destroying a kingdom was nothing compared to the value of a famed smith's knowledge. Due to Alba Gray's status as a famed smith, even demigods treated him with respect. Of the many things this NPC was known for, the most famous was his mana forging notes. It was the capital Alba Gray had relied on to become a famed smith in the first place. In fact, his mana forging notes were one of the reasons that the Ten Saints Empire had become as powerful as it was now. The various superpowers had fought tooth and nail for a single leaf of Alba Gray's mana forging notes. Some had even offered to trade fragmented legendary items for the pages. With Alba Gray standing before him and offering him a favor, Shifeng had to secure the very item that made the NPC so famous. The hero took a long look at Shifeng, and the silence stretched until it felt awkward. Is the request too much? Shifeng anxiously asked. You have a very good eye, young adventurer. You know what is most valuable, Alba Gray praised. Unfortunately, I've stored my mana forging notes in the Ten Saints Empire's Imperial Library. Not even I have the authority to retrieve them, and unfortunately, the materials I would need to create a copy no longer exist in this world. Sure enough, although Shifeng was disappointed, he wasn't surprised. The Ten Saints Empire treated Alba Gray's mana forging notes as a national treasure. The notes were even more valuable than a legendary item. Just as Shifeng was about to give up and wondered if he should ask the famed smith to craft him a custom-made fragmented legendary item, Alba Gray opened his mouth to speak again. But don't be too disappointed. Before I pen the official mana forging notes, I created a few drafts. Although I have lost many of them, I do have one volume of my drafts with me. If you don't mind, I can gift you this volume, Alba Gray informed Shifeng as he retrieved an ancient booklet that radiated faint traces of mana. The booklet was old and tattered, but it felt somehow timeless, as if very few things in this world could destroy it. Thank you, Lord Hero. I will take good care of it, Shifeng said as he accepted the booklet. He was still disheartened that he couldn't obtain the full compilation of the mana forging notes. He was surprised and pleased that he could obtain one of the notes' volumes. Alba Gray had relied on his mana forging notes to become a famed smith. A single volume could easily rival the value of a legendary item. There's no need to thank me. If you need help in the future, you may contact me through my communication crystal, Alba Gray said, smiling. He then transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from everyone's vision. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU system. You have earned Alba Gray's admiration. Alba Gray's favorability of you has increased by 10 points. System. Alba Gray's favorability of you has reached 100 points. You have become Alba Gray's friend. Blackie and the others were confused as they watched the exchange. They didn't understand why Shifeng had asked the hero for a tattered notebook, and based on their guild leader's expression, he seemed ecstatic about it. As Shifeng stored the mana forging notes draft volume in his bag, Yantianqing approached with a white energy crystal in hand. Guild leader, this crystal Yulunium dropped is very strange. Even with my master appraisal skill, I couldn't appraise it, Yantianqing said, a hint of excitement flashing in his eyes as he gazed at the energy crystal. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.